Okay, it looks like we have stabilized. We might have some folks continue to join us for the next first few moments as we kick off our program for the day. So I'd like to first of all say thank you to everybody. This is an exciting venue that we've put on to help increase our outreach to our local agency partners, and we really appreciate you joining us. So welcome. Welcome to all 345 and climbing participants. So what this is the Caltrans Local Assistance Training Day. And our Assistant Division Chief, Sujai, is going to talk a little bit about the background and the accomplishments that we've achieved through this venue over the last years. What we do in these events is kind of three things that are each really, really important, but a little different. So this is what we would call a hybrid venue because we provide information sharing, the latest and greatest updates on state and federal funding, regulation, and guidance changes and so forth. We also provide short courses or mini trainings that are sort of like snapshots of the fuller length, more detailed trainings that we provide in half days, full days, multi-day courses, or in a variety of on-demand training modules that we provided that some of our presenters might show you today in terms of how you can access our tools and templates, our guidance and training for your needs along the way. Tracy Cohn from Sac State is also going to talk about how you can register for other LTAP and technical assistance trainings. So you can take what we provide for you today under the training component of today's venue a little bit deeper. And then last, but certainly not least, possibly even most importantly, is a peer exchange, facilitating the sharing of best practices between our partners so that this isn't a one-way conversation here at Caltrans information dump, as it were, but that you're able to learn from each other and share your own tricks of the trade with your peers at agencies, small and large, rural and urban, across the entire state. And why we do this is because, let's be honest, local assistance is kind of complicated. We've got lots of programs, policies, procedures, processes. And I mean, even for those of us that have been doing this for years and years and years, there's always a need to share information. There's always a need to update our approaches. There's always a need to make sure that our customers, our clients, our partners are really up to speed on all of the nitty gritty in terms of being successful with local agency project delivery and maximizing our state and federal funding. Okay. So what I'm going to do right now is, as we continue to see a couple people continue to join us here, is I'm going to share the agenda today. And this is basically what we're going to be looking at. Here, Sujaya and Dawn are going to give us a leadership message on our accomplishments over the last year. We have some information sharing that I mentioned from state and federal programs, as well as upcoming training opportunities through the LTAP and CTAP programs that Sherry is going to describe. And our mini trainings, our short courses today, are largely going to cover the ICAP process, an indirect cost allocation plan and auditing process, right? What that looks like to submit those documents, what it looks like from our perspective when we audit them, what kind of findings we see frequently, and best practices to avoid any problems, to make sure that your project expenses are fully reimbursable. And again, as well as, what it looks like in terms of A&E consultant contracts and their ICAPs to make sure that, again, we don't have any problems with those issues. We've got on tap for today some high-risk items in Chapter 10, Exhibit 10C that Bing is going to talk about. And we got a special guest with us today from the districts. Jim is going to talk about the final invoice and final report of expenditures. Again, very, very important, because we want to make sure that your projects don't inadvertently go inactive because they're not closed out on time, right? So that final invoice, final report of expenditures, super important. And then for the first time in this venue, we're successful in roping in one of our external agency, partners. We've got Jose Luis from SACOG, who's going to talk about what they do as an MPO to provide local project delivery coordination assistance to their entire region, right? To all of the members that make up SACOG's body, as it were. That's direct assistance from the MPO to the locals. Jose is going to talk about, Jim's going to chime in a little bit in that because Jim is over there in District 3 and works very closely with Jose Luis and be able to give us a little bit of a gut check on what Jose Luis is going to be sharing with us today. Now, with that, we do have a couple breaks, and so I'm going to ask Tracy to help me with the clock watching, as it were. And thank you, Sherry, for volunteering to do that as well. I want to talk about a little bit of housekeeping here. At the bottom of your bar, you should see a Q&A box and you should see a chat box. We're going to use those differently, and I want to go over that here briefly. We are going to be answering questions in real time via the Q&A box. So go ahead and open that now. Now, simultaneously, although we will not answer questions there because we want to basically create a transcript for today's event that we can provide for you to you for future reference, we will be dropping links, contact information, helpful hints, that kind of thing, resources, and so forth in the chat. So recommend that you open them both. In the chat, our presenters may drop some cool link or add some interesting information, or if they don't have it in their PowerPoint, maybe they'll drop their contact information over there. Copy and paste that as you go because those are valuable resources. But the transcript of today, any questions that you ask and any answers that we provide are going to be over in the Q&A box. Okay, housekeeping item number one. Number two, because we have so many participants, we're already over 400 this morning. We've had to switch from the training version of Zoom to the webinar version of Zoom, which doesn't allow us as much of the interactive element because we have to control for those errant, unmuted individuals, barking dogs and trash trucks driving out on the street out front of your office. So raise your hand. That is the other key button down there at the bottom of your toolbar. And we're 2 years deep into the virtual universe, as it were. So hopefully a lot of this stuff is familiar for you. But if you have a question and there's more context and we ask you, hey, Tom, or hey, Sue, can you unmute can you raise your hand so we can unmute you? We'd like to get a little bit more background on your question, or if there's something that really doesn't lend itself to a typed question, press the raise hand button, and then we will be able to acknowledge you and unmute you and then have a conversation. Okay. As always, we're not here to talk about project specifics. So we're here to really share everything with each other that's universal, as it were, or translatable. So if you do have project specific questions, we'll ask you to table that to conferring with your district DLAE, your district local assistance area engineers. Okay. And then lastly, as I said, we are going to provide a transcript of today's Q&A. So if for time there are questions that we don't get to, don't worry. We will have all of those questions answered and send out a transcript after the fact. Now, I'm going to move into a very quick icebreaker. I'd like for you all to open your chat, open your Q&A, and in your chat, I want you, oh, I forgot. Nope, that's it. In the chat, I would like for you to share with us your role and how many years you have been in the transportation industry. We'll just do one quick icebreaker and then we'll move directly into the program. We want to just kind of see some activity and make sure that you all are able to effectively use your the tools that we just described. Yeah, thank you, everybody. So we got people 10 years, 15 years, 4 years, 4 months, 3 years, planners, accountants, project managers, engineers, analysts. So I think the reason why we do this icebreaker exercise is to demonstrate just how diverse of a workforce, of a community that we have here in local assistance. How many pieces of the process, how many individual functional units are required to take that federal funding, turn them into projects, pump them through contracts, get them into the design and the delivery process, and then effectively close them out, right? Whether you're a design engineer, you're an environmental planner, you're an analyst of processing invoices, you're a project manager, herding cats, whatever your role is, you are super important to us. Now I'm going to give you a question. I don't want you to provide us any more answers for now. I want you to think about this as you go. As you listen to our program, what kind of challenges do you experience? What kind of topics would you like to hear from us in the future? Think about that, and that's where I'm going to land at the end of the day. Okay. We want to make sure that this quarterly program is high value and high impact for you. So give that some thought as you go. Think about where you've been tripped up or where you've been super successful, but you see other people having a hard time. Maybe you could be a best practice co-presenter with us someday. Give that some thought. That's where I'm going to land at the end of the day. In the meantime, I'm going to turn it over to Sujaya and Dee and Dawn for our leadership message on our accomplishments over the last year. Sujaya, Dawn.
Thank you, Neil. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Local Assistance Training Day. This is our third event, so we've been having this every quarter. I can see we are well over 400 participants, and what a great turnout. I also want to thank everybody that's presenting today and the hosts and everybody that helped put together this event. I hear that so far we've reached over 1,000 participants. That's a great opportunity for us to offer informal training. And we've also been looking at various ways to improve our agenda and bring more meaningful training to you. A few years back, there was this concept of just-in-time training. What it really meant was being able to train your staff at the point that you really needed them to do that particular work on a project. Right? The concept was innovative, but implementing it practically was a challenge because that meant you really needed to know your portfolio. You needed to know which projects will go out when and what kind of skill sets you needed to be applied on those projects. I know Caltrans tried to implement it, and others in the transportation industry tried it, but I don't think it quite worked practically, but it was a great concept. But I think that's what the Local Assistance Training Day helps achieve, because here we come up with agenda items that meets the need at that point. You bring in trainers, you bring in participants who actually need training in that area, and we can focus on what's priority or which milestone or which topics are priority during that time. So I think we've found innovative and a very practical way to just achieve just-in-time training. And also, I'm saying that we have a great agenda today. There's opportunity for peer exchange. So SACOG, thank you. And also, this is a great partnership effort where we see trainers from both Caltrans side and the larger transportation industry and participating. So I'm very excited about today, and I hope you are too. With that, I will turn it over to Dawn.
Thank you, Sujaya. I don't know if I can leave my video on. I'm lagging a little, so let me do this. I wanted to acknowledge and thank Local Assistance once again. This concept of a training day had started being discussed at the regional planning agency meetings, where it was very clear that all of the efforts in local assistance really warranted more attention and more detail, and the ability for local assistance to expand on the initiatives it was taking to really help local agencies deliver their projects. And so a couple of years ago, Yvonne Garcia, my former RTPA moderator, began working with local assistance. And I have to say that this is really impressive. Over 400 participants on the meeting today. The first Local Assistance Training Day reached an even higher number. And I just appreciate what local assistance is doing. For those who don't know me, I have over 30 years in transportation and transportation finance. I worked in local assistance in the mid-90s during the original re-engineering task force for local assistance. So what I have seen with the change in the management team and local assistance over the last few years is a very, very concerted effort to reach out and find out what local agencies need to better deliver their projects and to better meet all the regulatory requirements, because we all know the requirements to deliver state and federal funded projects are pretty extensive. And to help simplify that, help make sure local agencies have what they need to be able to deliver those projects is really very critical. So thank you all participants for being here today to become better informed and be able to meet your requirements and deliver really critical projects to your communities. And thank you, local assistants, for all of your efforts in doing this. I cannot stress enough that if you do have questions or topic areas, think about that, what Neil suggested. This does not have to be just a one-way training day. They have been developing frequently asked questions. If there are simple things like, well, what does CWA mean? First look on the website. They have tools developed already, but then think about the questions that have been forefront in your mind, because so much has already been accomplished. The project end date tools and other tools under development, the Lean Six Sigma efforts to streamline processes have been, really valuable. So we've accomplished a lot, but we know there are still questions out there, and we know there are best practices, these peer exchanges that are going to add value for everybody around the state. So I just encourage you to think about that. I thank you all for being here today, and thank you, local assistants, for hosting once again.
All right, well, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Kathy?
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining. My name is Kathy McKeown. I am the Office Chief at the Office of State Programs. We handle not only the state programs, the bond programs, but we also handle the ATP programs, which does have some federal funding. Today, I'm going to have Summer with me, and she's going to be going over a lot of the online resources. But first, I just kind of wanted to give you an update on our new people that we have here in our office. Primarily, you guys work with the DLAEs, but and the districts, but in the headquarters, I thought it would be helpful just to share. So, Summer, if you could move on to the slide with the, our office organization. This is, there you go, one more. There we go. So we do have some new folks. I think that I had introduced perhaps Elijah Hall. He's our STIP and timely use of funds manager. He's the one that coordinates with the CTC on all the CTC items, and he's the one that's reaching out and asking for more information. He's been awesome. He is acting at this time, but he's done a bang-up job. I did want to also note that he is the STIP COVID coordinator as well. There's two parts of STIP. There's CRISA, and then there's STIP COVID. Those are two different programs. So there's been a little bit of confusion on that, but he does handle the STIP COVID portion. In addition to that, we have a new person that is working with us. He just came on. His name is Afrid Sarkar. He's our ATP coordinator, and he's going to be assisting Trina and Desiree in, all things ATP related, funding questions, things like that. So we're very excited to have him on. I just wanted to point out those new folks that we have. But this is generally the lay of the land for our office. Mary's group does all the reporting for the ATP program and also coordinates with the CTC. Then we have Sharon and Manuel, who is handling the LPP program, as well as the Priority Legislative Budget Projects, fondly referred to as the state earmarks. And then Trina and Desiree handle the ATP, and Summer handles the ATP, NI, and ATRC. So I hope this gives you kind of a general overview of our office. I know sometimes it can be confusing. I will be going a little bit over the AT or the LP, the PLBP, some of the recent changes on that one, but I wanted to give Summer an opportunity to go ahead and show you guys the resources, because I know we're a little bit over. We started about 10 minutes behind. So Summer, if you could quickly run through the resources that we have here in our office.
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Summer Lopez. I'm the acting project manager for ATP Non-Infrastructure and Plans and the Active Transportation Resource Center. And I just wanted to give an overview of the ATRC as well as some other ATP resources that you can find on our website. So the ATRC's mission is to provide resources, technical assistance, and training to transportation partners across California to increase opportunity for the success of active transportation projects. We offer classroom and online training and also webinar training, non-infrastructure workshops, technical assistance programs, tools, and active transportation focused resources for various project types. Today, I'd like to share some resources, guides, technical assistance, and training opportunities. And I'd encourage you to look at this presentation as a guidebook that you can utilize and share. You'll notice blue buttons throughout this entire presentation, and when you receive a copy of it, you can click those to access everything that I'm talking about today. So this is our ATRC website guide, where you will find links to all of our important technical assistance programs, most of the tools we have available, several of our popular resources, and links to our most popular trainings. If you're new to the ATRC or you just need a refresher, this guide is a really great place to start. This is our ATP training guide, where you can find all relevant ATP application training workshops and webinars. You'll also find project design training and project implementation training. Please note that this is where you'll find some of our non-ATRC trainings, like CalSmart reporting training and our Next Steps workshop. Both of those are located under project implementation. Here are a few more ATP resources. Those first two at the top are non-infrastructure. The first is a new one that we just released with Cycle 6, and it is a resource that will train you on how to plan for sustainability in your non-infrastructure programs. The second is our e-fact sheets for non-infrastructure. We recently updated these, so you'll find lots of new content. Some other resources I wanted to share is our automated counter loan program. This is a program that we offer through the ATRC. It is free to use, and you can borrow count equipment for your active transportation projects. So if you need help with that, or you have any questions, you can reach out to us. You can find it at the link there on the presentation. I also wanted to share the online bikeway design course. This is an at your own pace training, and it will teach you the basic principles of planning and design for bikeways. Just a note, we also offer a live version of this class, and you can sign up for upcoming courses on our website. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. While we are talking about active transportation, I'm going to step away from the ATRC for a second and just wanted to point out a few important ATP web pages. You may be familiar with these, but I wanted to make sure that I pointed them out in case you're new to our program. So the first one is more for general information about our program, about the ATP, and also contact information. You can access it there at that blue button. The next one is ATP general and technical information page. This is where you'll find all of the relevant ATP application documents and attachments, instructions, and guidance. We also now offer a training highlight where we point out a couple of resources that are very helpful for the ATP. The third page is the CTC Active Transportation Program webpage, and I wanted to specifically point out the reference documents section. It is a section where you will find policies and guidelines, and also where you will find their latest policy on user counts. So if you haven't checked that out, that's where you will find that policy. Okay, back to the ATRC. So we have a few technical assistance opportunities that I wanted to share with you. The first is our Kit of Parts pilot program. This is a new program that we are in collaboration with California Walks and Southern California Association of Governments Go Human project. Our goal with this program is to expand SCAG's existing Go Human kit of parts to statewide usage. The kit contains components of the temporary demonstration projects that agencies can use for active transportation pop-up events. Our team will be selecting 3 agencies in North, Central, and Southern California outside of SCAG's region. And those agencies will be able to borrow the kits from the ATRC and do a demonstration project or other pop-up event and use this as an opportunity for future active transportation program or other grant application community engagement. Really great opportunity. And the application for this is open now. So if you're interested in applying, you can apply at this link. And please note that the final deadline to apply is July 11th at 5 p.m. The next program I wanted to tell you about is our Evaluation and Technical Assistance Program. The objective of this program is to assist local agencies, specifically in disadvantaged communities, in gathering before and after project data for ATP reporting and other project evaluation purposes. We are launching this program very soon, anticipating this summer, and we expect the first deliverable to be available this fall, which will be that evaluation framework. The technical assistance component should launch around winter of this year or early next year. So these are the three pieces in the program. The first is the evaluation framework. So the team, our consultant team, will develop a performance metric evaluation plan for the active transportation program. We plan to make this a very easy to use framework with different ways to measure the success of your project. The second piece is tailored technical assistance that focuses on data collection and evaluation for individual projects. Finally, the program offers data displays and infographic development, where our consultant team will create infographics with the data on your project and also project profiles on your projects. Another quick TA opportunity we have available is our non-infrastructure TA offered through the California Department of Public Health. So if you're a non-infrastructure implementer or developing a non-infrastructure application for the ATP and you have specific questions about program development or just need other help for non-infrastructure, you can reach out to CDPH to get started. Okay, finally, I wanted to wrap up with some upcoming training opportunities. So we have a series called On the Move, which is a webinar and teleconference series, lots of interesting topics that are very timely and related to active transportation. So we offer these on a quarterly basis. You can find all of our past webinars and teleconferences and our future schedule at the link. I also mentioned that virtual live training on bicycle planning and design course, which you can register for now, and that course is happening November 15th and 17th. We are also offering a grant writing course entitled Positioning for Successful Grant Applications. Next one's happening tomorrow, June 8th and 9th. And the next one is the 29th and 30th. So you can register for those at the link. And finally, we're offering a new training, which we anticipate to launch this summer and have those tentatively planned for July and September. Here's some general contacts. You can find it in the presentation later. And finally, I want to encourage you to share the ATRC. You can help us spread awareness by sharing this resource presentation with a colleague, encouraging a colleague to sign up for our listserv, or just share a valuable resource from our website to your network. And that's all I have. Thank you.
8 programs,
Thanks
nailed
so
it
much,
again.
Summer. Hey, Summer, can you do me one favor and go back to our organizational chart? I did want to point out we had one other that I think I had forgotten. We do have a new person, Carrie Aylesbury Vidad. She is acting right now for the bond program. She works with both Sharon and Manuel. So I did want to point out that she was new as well, if I hadn't already. I also wanted to note, just quickly, because I know we're a little behind, the PLBP, the State Earmarks Project program did do an adjustment, and they are allowing for the advance payment. We have reached out to all the agencies to coordinate with them. If you do have one of those projects and you did not get reached out to, please contact me directly and I'll be happy to share any information that I have. We're quickly trying to pull together a funds transfer agreement with all the agencies before June 25th, and that's going to take quite a bit of coordination. But we're hoping to do that through workshops as well as keeping these lines of communication open. So that's it for me. I'll turn it over to Robert Peterson.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. So I don't have a nice presentation, so you'll just have to listen with your ears. So just go through a couple of my federal programs that are in my office, just kind of some latest information that I'm seeing. Obviously, I'm not going to provide everything about IDJA. That would take all day, and I don't think you want to hear me. So let's go with the bridge program. That's always near and dear to, it seems like, a lot of people's hearts, maybe good or bad. But so the good news is funding is coming. The bad news is some of the funding will end in 5 years. I'll get more into that. So our message is going to be to local bridge owners is deliver, deliver, deliver. So make sure that you start meeting those milestones and pushing forward, because with our core approachments, we got a little increase around 331. As you recall, it was like 300. But now we've got, as you know, the Bridge Formula program that has come in. It's a 5-year program, so there's no guarantee that it's going to continue after 5 years. And so, but that looks like it's going to be around 252 million. So we got a total of 583 million, if I do my numbers right, that is coming into the HBP. So we've got lots of money, but unfortunately, we're kind of in debt, as you probably have heard from others. So we've got to pay our bills first. So that's the first priority, which is probably good news for local agencies because you're using your own local funds. So those we can convert to federal dollars, and now you can turn those dollars around and use them for your other transportation needs. So that's the good news. And then from there, once we start paying on our debt, then of course, any projects that are ready to advertise or nearly ready to advertise, of course, those get priority. We're going to try to advance projects, and then we're going to be advancing new projects within the program, basically get projects within the program, which we haven't added any since 2018. So yeah, there's a big list waiting to get in. So that's the good news. As I mentioned, Deliver is going to be something we're going to be wanting agencies to do as quick as possible. There shouldn't be any excuse to say, we don't have funding, because we will try to get you the funding so you can get to the next milestone. So, and then of course, the other area is the Bridge Investment Program is the grant that is coming as well from the US DOT. That notice has not been released, but I think it will be shortly here, summer, fall. So I would encourage every bridge owner out there, if they've got high cost bridge projects, to take advantage of that, because every dollar that goes into that Bridge Investment Program will be that dollar will then basically help other bridge owners within the program to deliver their project, and so we can really be able to keep our programs sustainable and get it back to really health over the many years. So that's something that we'd be looking out for. The next thing for the program is training. We're looking to put some training together, kind of on-time training, focused training in different areas. That's something that my staff is working on right now. So look for that coming in the fall. So moving over to local HSIP, as you know, you probably have seen the announcement is May 9th. Applications are due the 12th. There's approximately about $210 million will be available for funding. And like Cycle 10, it'll be state funded for all the applications. There's some that may be federalized, as you know, or maybe you may not know, but we have triggers that were put in place for high-risk rural roads and vulnerable users. Unfortunately, California got triggered on those, and so there's some requirements that need to be that are required for that. And so there may be some high-risk rural road projects we might have to federalize, but that's something that but the majority of the funds will be state-only funds. There is a 10% match. We've moved back to having a match. We would like to spread out more funding to more projects, which is different from years past. As you recall, some are 100% funded. We've reduced our delivery has been very good, to the point now, as you notice on our OA report, we are in the negative. So that means now we've got to be more constrained with our program. Even though we got an increase of HSIP, the call will be about the same. So we had a webinar and a Q&A, and they've been posted on our website. So if you missed that webinar on Cycle 11, please take a look at it. The Q&A will be posted from that webinar. And also, as you know, in times past, a local road safety plan is going to be required in order to apply for that. The other area is on the federal level is the Safe Streets and Roads opportunity for basically Vision Zero action plans, or even activity within those plans are available for funding. You probably saw that notice. Those applications are due September 15th. They have a really good website of a lot of information on that. So please go to that website. I'll put that link in there, but it's really the transportation.gov/grants. They really keep a good website updated of all the different grant opportunities out there. The other area is, of course, the community project funding. We fondly call them earmarks, but on our website. So that's going to be under my office. Looks like last fiscal year, about 46 projects under that the transportation earmark. 46 agencies were successful in getting about almost $92 million. Looks like there's another call that just closed, but that list has not been announced. But as soon as we get more information from FHWA on that, we'll be posting them on our website. In my office area, we'll maintain that. So that'll be in my office where we'll be coordinating those earmarks. So look for that. So the other area, as far as I'll just finish up here, but any other grant opportunities, CalSTA keeps a really good external website. I'll post that link as well on all the alternative infrastructure acts within that. So, and then finally, I have been approved to get more resources, aka bodies, within my office. So I'll be hiring to help the Highway Bridge Program out, the HSIP program, and then the ER and other federal programs that are headed by seniors. So I'll be adding some more TE civils within those offices, within those branches. So that's good news. Hopefully I'll be getting those folks on board within the next few months. So with that, I will stop. Looks like be able to get enough time for the next speaker. Thank you.
Very good. We asked Nicole Longoria and Keith Duncan to come in under federal programs update to give us a snapshot on what's new and any key information you guys are going to need to know regarding IJA. Nicole?
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
We hear you just fine.
Okay, super. I thought I would actually also take a couple of minutes and provide a summary of what we're doing to implement the IIJA here in California. There's a lot of folks on the call today that may not have been hearing these presentations and getting this information. So if that's okay with you, I'd like to take a couple of minutes to do that as well.
Bring it.
Okay, cool. So as you all know, since the bill was enacted last November, we have all been working very, very hard to implement this legislation. Many of you have been involved with our process, and there are many, many, many other California transportation partners and stakeholders as well that have been participating. So it's been really, really a great process that we've been working through the last few months. Basically, since the bill was passed, CalSTA had convened the implementation working group that started back in December. Our initial kickoff meeting was held on December 17th, and we've had about 8 meetings so far. The working group consists of many different partners, a lot of our traditional partners, so our federal, state, local, tribal government representatives, and a lot of new non-traditional partners, which has been really great to see as well. And presently, our working group has just a little over 400 members when everyone is tuned in. So we are having a lot of really great participation. We also have an open door policy, so we're not turning away anyone else that does want to participate or just listen in to these working group meetings. As a subset of this working group, we formed 13 sub-working groups, which are led by Caltrans policy leaders and subject matter experts. I know many of you on the call here today are participating or have participated in these sub-working groups, and they're chugging along. We're making some great progress. So these groups tend to meet as needed, and then they also participate in our larger CalSTA working group meetings to provide updates on their sub-working groups. And they're really playing just a vital role in this process. They're, the ones that are really getting into the nitty-gritty and analyzing the legislation and how it's impacting their respective groups.
and also developing action plans so that we can successfully implement the IIJA here in California. So to date, we just have 2 sub-working groups that have kind of reached the finish line. The overall funding split sub-working group, which has been led by Keith Duncan, finished its complex budget negotiations. And I'll turn it over to him in a couple of minutes here if he wants to chime in. And then the other group is the Fix It First sub-working group, which has basically wrapped. The action plan has not been released yet, but it's in the process of being finalized, so it'll be out soon. We're still waiting on guidance from the USDOT for a couple of our formula apportionment programs. So given that context, we've had to kind of extend our timeline and continue the working group schedule to meet through the summer. But we have extended the cadence to more of a 6-week frequency instead of a 3-week, frequency. So we're trying to allow this additional time to allow the federal guidance to be published, and the sub-working groups will continue to meet during the summer and develop their action plans. So with that being said, if any of you are interested in any of these upcoming meetings and you don't have the information or you don't know how to get the information, please contact me. I'd be more than happy to send it to you. As Robert mentioned, CalSTA has a really great website that's housing all of our meeting notes and sub-working group materials, other federal resources, and just a lot of great stuff. So I think he said he was going to drop that link in the chat. And our next full working group meeting is going to be held on June 24th from 11 to 12. So I encourage you all to participate if you would like to. And with that, I haven't peeked at all the attendees, but I'm thinking Keith's on there somewhere. I'm not sure if he wants to chime in and say anything else about his sub-working group process.
I am here, Nicole. Thank
Good morning, Keith.
Good morning, Nicole, and good morning to all. Happy Tuesday. In relation to the funding splits, as everyone is hopefully aware, traditionally it's been the federal funding that flows through FHWA through the formula programs has been split 60-40, as Nicole's mentioned, 60% going state, 40% through the local agencies. And that was the primary goal as we were working through our sub-working group discussions. Once we came to a landing spot, one of the primary takeaways that was agreed to by all that were involved, local agencies, state agencies, as part of the overall discussion, was the agreement we have in place is for year 1. And the caveat there is, as Nicole mentioned, we still have some federal guidance still that should be coming in, and there may be state legislation and other matters that may require funding splits to be adjusted slightly. If those funding splits do need to be adjusted slightly, we would then reconvene the group to look at year 2 and beyond. The primary goal there is, again, full transparency, talk about here's what the federal funding is, here's how it's split, here's the benefit from both the state and the local perspective, so we can find a good landing spot. So it is one of those, we have an agreement in place for this first year. If anything does require it to be changed, we will reconvene. If nothing does require a change, the intent is to communicate that to our working group as well as all local and state entities involved in the process. But we're definitely looking forward to getting this federal funding. As Robert has already mentioned, we're a little late in the game when we capture the funding split agreement. We're trying to get the funding invested as quickly as possible so we can hopefully qualify for a maximum August redistribution, as California has been quite successful over the last few years. So with that, I'll wrap it up because Nicole did a wonderful job, and I wish you all a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Keith. And Neil, that's all I have as well.
That's great. A couple notes here. As you could already imagine, under both state and federal programs, there's a ton of information to share. So keep your eye on the chat as we drop our contact information, links to resources, and our program-specific web pages. And as always, we will provide the portal link for all of our meeting material today is already in the chat. And we're going to be following up with our Q&A log as well as our transcripts from today. So thank you, Nicole, and thank you, Keith, so much for joining us. Really appreciate your federal programs update there, Robert. Please keep your eye on the chat for those resources, and we'll go ahead and turn it over to Sherry, who's going to provide some more resources on training opportunities that you can avail yourself of. Sherry?
Good morning, everyone. There's a little bit of lag time on my side, unfortunately, with the computer. You're probably seeing still the presentation notes, I'm sure. Give it just a second. We'll try that again. Sorry about that, everyone. There just really is a technical issue with my laptop. There we go. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Good morning. My name is Sherry Graham. I am the Division of Local Assistance, Training and Communications Coordinator, and I work within the Office of Guidance and Oversight with Daniel Burke, Program Reviews and Outreach Manager. I'm going to give you a little overview of the LTAP and the CTAP Center.
Hi, Sherry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Hi, we're still seeing your notes.
Oh, not sure why that is.
Well, while Sherry works on that, we get to say that these live events in this new virtual world is so fun because we constantly get to learn not just about the technologies, but new ways of engaging you. While Sherry works on that, I want to reiterate the question that we're going to end on today, which is, as you think about your function, and as you think about all the various local assistance policies, processes, procedures that are involved in successfully delivering your projects and utilizing our federal obligational authority, what topics would you like us to cover in the future? What challenge areas do you see, or what best practices have you learned over the years that you would like to share? When we asked earlier, what your functions are and how long you've been in the industry, the range of tenure, as it were, spans from 1 week, fresh hire, to 38 years. We got executive directors, public work directors, accountants, administrators, all kinds of folks. And you all have a different perch and a different purview on the local assistance process. So think about that through today's program. That's where we're going to end.
Yeah, I apologize. My laptop is actually freezing. I don't know why that is. We've gone through this 5 times practice run.
Well, hey, Sherry, that's okay.
I can go ahead.
Everybody has your presentation.
Without the presentation, I can give everyone an overview. Thank you. Once again, I'm sorry, everyone on the call. What I will do is at the end of this presentation, I assure you I will put all PowerPoint hyperlinks and provide that to everyone so that you have that information. So once again, my name is Sherry Graham. I am the Division of Local Assistance Training and Communications Coordinator, and I work within the Office of Guidance and Oversight. So we have 2 separate programs that are funded. We have the LTAP program and the CTAP program. The LTAP program is the local assistance, the local technical assistance program, and the CTAP program, cooperative training assistance program. Those programs provide local and tribal agencies across the state services for your local and tribal agency. So the LTAP Center is currently operated through the California Center for International Trade and Transportation, CITT full LTAP Center, and site is transitioning. Currently, Sac State operates and manages the LTAP Center. But what we will do is I'll get you all those links in the chat. Sac State, which you are very familiar, is actually currently running the Cooperative Training Assistance Program and is managed through Sac State. Many of you are familiar with the courses through Sac State. Those trainings would be the Federal Aid Training, the Resident Engineer Academy for 2022 through 23, which will be starting in September, and the Labor Compliance and other trainings. So UC Berkeley operates the tech transfer subsidized trainings funded through the CTAP program as well, and are available for local and tribal agencies. Berkeley provides many of the technical required trainings that may be familiar. Tech Transfer is preparing a self-paced on-demand classes soon. Keep an eye on the Tech Transfer site for upcoming trainings, online, in-person, and self-paced. Tech Transfer can also design classes for your local or tribal agency. A great example might be the Work Zone Safety and Traffic Control. I'll put their contact information in the chat in just a moment. And then to sum things up, so the LTAP is managed through California International Trade and Transportation through California State University of Long Beach. And the CTAP program is funded through state funding, and Sac State and UC Berkeley provide those trainings. I also wanted to tell you about the DLA blog and the DLA email announcements that we send out weekly. So some of you may be familiar with the DLA blog. That lists all relevant news and resources and upcoming trainings as well through the LTAP and CTAP centers. We also have the DLA email announcements that go out every Wednesday, and I can provide that sign up information in the chat for you. Those email announcements go out weekly. You can see news, resources, and trainings in your area. And then, so we also have a survey assessment that's coming up for the Transportation Cooperative Committee survey. And I can put that information in the chat for you. The survey invites participants in a survey that will help TCC and Caltrans Division of Local Assistance in efforts to improve local assistance process and continued improvement. So overall, if you have questions for the Division of Local Assistance regarding subsidized trainings for your local or tribal agency, you can reach us at caltrans.dla@dot.ca.gov. And I'm going to hand it back over to Neil.
All right, everybody. Well, hey, we really appreciate you bearing with any kind of technical difficulties and trying to frankly absorb as much information as we're laying down. Just a reminder, we're going to be answering questions in the chat. I'm sorry, in the Q&A. We're going to be providing links to resources and contact information in the chat. Our transcript will be based on the Q&A. You already have a link to the portal with all of today's presentation material, such as the actual PowerPoint that went with the presentation just now in the portal link provided in the chat. We're going to be providing a copy of the video, as well as a transcript of today's program. And we are going to take a brief 5-minute break before we come back and enter the mini training session, or the short course session of today's program. So Sherry, if you could put on a timer for us, and we're going to top off our coffee, take a quick bio break or whatever we need before we jump into the next portion of the program. Again, not to belabor the point, but please keep your eye on that chat as we continue to drop links and resources and contact information. Thank you. So a full program as always. We do have a producer behind the scene for presenters. If we have any technical difficulties, we can ask our producer over at Sac State to jump in and screen share and sort of lead your presentation for you if we have any of those kinds of issues along the way. And that's actually one of the fun parts about this virtual environment, right? You know, we get to exercise our creativity muscles, our flexibility muscles, you know, as we kind of try to pull off these virtual programs in our various professions. Next up on the agenda, we have Gerald, who's going to talk about our ICAP process. Gerald is not with local assistance. He'll introduce himself, but Gerald is a really good example of just how many parallel functions or sister departments, as it were, or divisions or fellow offices like Keith and Nicole Longoria just a moment ago that we work with and frankly depend upon to be successful here in local assistance. Gerald, you maybe introduce yourself, give us a little background on who you are, what you do, and give us the goods.
Sure. Let me go ahead and share my presentation. Can everybody see my presentation?
We got you.
Awesome. So thank you, Neil. Good morning, everyone. My name is Gerald Lee. I'm the audit manager for Caltrans Internal Audit Office. We are a new audit office. I'm going to scroll to the next slide. We were established on July 1st of 2021, and our acronym is CHAO, CIAO. And currently, we are taking over some of the responsibilities from the Independent Office of Audits and Investigations starting July 1st. And one of the items that we are taking over is what was identified in the past as submission reviews. And in the future, we plan to grow and expand. Next slide. Before I start, I want to clarify the various indirect cost rates. So there are two different rates. There is a consultant rate, which is the architectural and engineering indirect cost rate. That is not our responsibility. That is the responsibility of Independent Office of Audits and Investigations. The next one is the agency rate, which in Iowa, we usually refer that as submission reviews. So moving forward, we're going to be talking about it in terms of a submission review point. And that is the responsibility of our office, Caltrans Internal Audits Office. And so just wanted to clarify the differences between the two. And within the agency indirect cost rates, we are in charge of reviewing the rate. So if you have an indirect cost rate for local agencies, we will be the one reviewing them. Now, for Independent Office of Audits Investigations, they are responsible for auditing the indirect cost rates. So just wanted to clarify in terms of the responsibilities between our office and the Independent Office of Audits and Investigations. So this is a little info from us. Our email addresses and our website and various information. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and go into our website and go through a demo of our review process. Sorry, hold on. So can everybody see my website, the Caltrans general website?
Looking good.
Awesome. So we are located under programs and under audits right here. And when you click over here, you can see that our responsibilities are the local government agency indirect cost rate review and the single audit review. Specifically for single audit, we are responsible for following up if a single audit have any findings associated to Caltrans projects. But going over here, we're going to talk about the local government agency indirect cost rate review. And starting July 1st, we will be responsible for reviewing the indirect cost rates. And so the first step for local governments, if they want to submit a rate proposal for their employees, they would go ahead and click on the indirect cost rate proposal intake form. And this explains the information and the process. There is also the email. The ICAP ICRP email is the same email that IOAI is currently hosting. As of July 1st, we will take over that responsibility. So you don't have to put in a new email address or anything like that. The transition is going to occur on July 1st. And there are some information. We want to make sure that we meet the criteria of 2 CFR 200. There are specifics in terms of state, local governments, nonprofit, education, and tribal. One of the key things is that in reviewing the indirect cost rate, we need to determine the eligibility. And so there is an intake form here that you can download. And hold on. Let's see. Sorry, there's a delay. Are you able to see my Acrobat PDF intake form?
Yes, we can see the form.
Awesome. So you can go ahead and download it. And I want to make sure that when you're filling this form, make sure it's Adobe Acrobat. There are examples where Edge might want to open the PDF file. If Edge does open the file, it's not going to function properly. So just want to FYI on that. This is the intake form where you're going to put in your agency information, fiscal year, tax ID, what organization, department acronyms. And the idea is that over here, you want to list all your funding sources from various departments, including federal agencies, within that specific year. And as you fill in the dollar amount, I'm just going to put in, like, say, 100 here. This form does a simple calculation. So it will automatically total the amount that you are receiving from various different sources. And then there is a third section, which is the Caltrans funded projects. And so the purpose of this is to determine whether or not if we are responsible for identifying the rates. And so this is the section where you'll be listing all the funding sources from Caltrans. Whenever you receive a check from Caltrans during that particular year, you will be identifying such as the various coding, like, for example, if it's local assistance, it's the LP2 2000 code. You have your low code, and then has like ATP or various funding sources information, a short description as to what the project is about and how much expenditures within that particular time fiscal year. Also, this is a calculation field, so that will go ahead and calculate down here. This will allow us to determine how much funding you've received from Caltrans within that particular fiscal year relative to all the different funding sources you have. And once you've completed that information, you're going to go ahead and fill in the information, and you will submit that application, this intake form, over to ICAP ICRP, where we will review it. And we will review, and we will provide you a receipt email acknowledging that we received your intake. And it'll probably take us a couple of days to verify the information from Caltrans, that these are indeed the costs that are billed to, that was paid out to your agency. And that will give us a couple of days, and we'll provide you an email informing you that you can file for an application. Any questions so far? Okay. I want to point out review and auditing. Reviewing is we are basically taking the information and reviewing them. We are not going physically to your site or physically doing an audit. That is a responsibility of IOAI. Going back to the form here, I will go ahead and go over to the application form. And this is the application form. And so once it is determined that Caltrans provided the most money, and there is no federal agencies, you would go ahead and download the application form. And apologies, it takes a long while. Oh, it's a little bit faster. Awesome. So this is the indirect cost rate form. And over here, you would identify the same information, tax ID, fiscal year, and also you want to identify who's responsible for completing this form, and also indicate what type of accounting system you're using in identifying your cost. Over here, these are the general provisions, making sure that you read through them and you understand the accounting charges and any auditor adjustments, things like that. Further down is when you submit an application, there are various methods of determining the calculations. There are the cognizant agencies, which is, for example, if a federal agency give the government agency money, then there would be a specific cognizant agency. De minimis rate is if you're new and you're starting off and you just want to claim the 10%, you can. That is the de minimis rate. There is a fixed rate. That is when you're using an estimate. Please note that you will also have to put in the carry forward information from the past 2 years. And you also have the final rate. The final rate is these are costs that has already been completed, and so you know exactly how much the costs are for those particular agents, those specific information. For cognizant agency, you would just list who the agency is, the rate, and the applicable fiscal year. Also provide a copy of that certification to indicate that that is indeed your cognizant agency. These are just relative examples as to what they are. This is where you have a down arrow, and you would go ahead and select which category you're going to select in terms of your application process. And then once you're done, you would go ahead and click on that email and attach it. Now, for example, if you have a cognizant rate, you would provide the certificate. If it's a de minimis rate, final rate, and a fixed carry forward, there are additional documents that you have to review and provide in order for us to review your indirect cost rates. Going back to further down here, you can see that there is a fixed rate calculation, there's a de minimis rate calculation, or sorry, a de minimis rate form, and there's a final rate calculation form. I'm going to click on the de minimis rate because that one's the easiest. And what it is this is just certifying that you do not want to provide any detailed information. You just want to claim the 10%. And you just need to certify that these are the information that you are following and abiding. And also that you have these, you've already implemented these requirements. And you would go ahead and identify and sign and send it back to us, and we will go ahead and comply and provide the 10% rate. If you have a, I'll go ahead and do the final rate because this one's a little bit easier compared to the fixed rate. In the final rate, so this is a calculation sheet. So the idea is that for every department you have, you're gonna fill in one sheet. So like say, if you're a large government agency and you have 5 departments and each one have their different rates, you would have to fill the sheet 5 times. So one for each department. So this is where you would put in the department. Further down over here in the indirect cost categories, this is where you're going to list the type of cost category, direct salary, travel costs, whatever cost category is identified in your accounting system, a short description of what it is. This indicates what is the applicable. So is this cost category apply to all staff, just to managers, supervisors, or some combination? And you would go ahead and select that. And then the 3 categories here is the direct, indirect, and unallowable cost. So if there are any direct salaries, and please note, only enter in the direct salaries, and you would put the information here. Any indirect costs, like say, for example, travel or something like that, you would put that here. Any unallowable costs that do not meet the requirements of 2 CFR, you would identify here. And what the form does is it will go ahead and perform the calculation for you, and it will go ahead and total the amounts. And so you notice that there's a D and an A. Further down the line, there will be an explanation as to how these costs are being calculated. And further down, if you have fringe benefits, you would also identify the fringe benefit category, description, which specific is applicable to, if it's a manager or supervisor, etc., any allowable costs and any unallowable costs per 2 CFR. Further down, it does the total. And then here, these are all calculation forms. So you see that these are letters corresponding to how the calculation is made, and the form will automatically do the calculation for you. So this, what we found in reviewing the submission review process, the calculation takes a long time, and there's no standardization. And so the idea for us is to standardize the process. And so local agencies would just identify the costs, and it will go ahead and perform all the calculations for you. I do want to make a point that because these are calculation fields, it may not work properly if you put in some number, like for example, 0. If you put in 0, it will perform an error because you cannot divide by 0. So just a little heads up, if you enter some number and it's like, hey, what's going on? Probably because you're doing a calculation because you can't divide 0. So it does a calculation for you. So as you enter in the information, this is the rate that you're going to be calculating. And if you agree with that, then you will go ahead and fill out the information and email us. Now, what we are going to be asking for is we're going to be asking for your org chart, and also importantly, any accounting information that you have supporting these allowable costs listed in the report. So if you're identifying, like, for example, some cost categories, say travel, it's $100. The goal is on your accounting system, there needs to make sure that there's a category for travel for that particular department, indicating that there was a overhead cost of indirect cost of $100. So you do have to provide support to back up the numbers that you are identifying. We will be sending out emails. Caltrans has a system called Filer, and what it is it's like the commercial equivalent of Box, where we give you access and you will go in and upload the information that we're requesting, such as support documentation to these amounts or chart, things like that. And then the last one is the fixed form. So if you go to the fixed form, you notice that everything is similar. So I'm not going to go into the details for that. But what's different is that these are estimated cost, and so further down you have a carry forward component. So here you would identify your base year, typically it's 2 years ago. You would put in the information, and because it's a carry forward, we need to also provide, the government agency also needs to provide the certificates from IOAI indicating that that is indeed your carry forward rate from 2 years ago. Everything is calculated automatically, so you can go ahead and review it, determine if you agree with it or not, and all the formulas are listed above. Once you agree, sign, email, and that would our staff will go ahead and review the process and ensure if it's correct. And in the future, we're currently in discussion with IT, and we are going to have a public Tableau. What public Tableau is the idea is that the local government agencies can log in and they can have access to the Tableau report, which will allow them to see exactly what status they are in your review process. So either we received your intake and we're reviewing it right now, or we received your application, it has not been assigned, and then further down to we are reviewing it, and then the last section is going to be we reviewed it and this is your rate. And we also plan to have weekly meetings starting the week of July 1st. The 1 hour meeting is going to be available to everyone to join in if they have any specific questions they have, if they need to print out their form. The goal is to make sure that we are able to review your rates as quickly as possible and provide you and verify that the information is correct. And so here is the rate that you can bill to Caltrans. And that is all I have for this.
So once again, a complicated process here in local assistance, no surprise. What I want to do, Gerald, with the next 5 minutes, if we can do, let's pivot to the Q&A.
Okay.
So just to kind of so everybody open up the Q&A box if you don't have it open there already. As a reminder, we are going to have a transcript, which also has an attachment with all of the links from today's that's over in the chat. So all of the links to resources and contact information and so forth and so on is going to be labeled and categorized in the transcript, in that particular attachment of the transcript. Whereas all of your questions will be answered via the Q&A box. Now, as you open the Q&A box, look at the top. You have 3 different tabs, as it were. And one is called open. And what that means is that somebody like Gerald or one of his team members is behind the scenes answering those questions in real time. Whereas the second tab is called answered. And you can see we've already answered through today's presentation 18 questions. So you can read those answers, you can see those questions as you go. Gerald, I'm going to ask you, for the sake of time, if you could go to the open tab, as it were, and see how many you might be able to answer. Go ahead and scroll all the way down, because there could be some questions unanswered.
Yeah.
Let me just go
Sure.
ahead and pick one. Like, what if I already submitted my ICAP using the old form? What do I do then?
Yeah, I see. Yeah, so I'm answering Tracy's right now. This will be provided through email instructions. And then also, if so in terms of the responsibility, we are accepting submission review applications as of July 1st. So if you've already submitted your proposal for 22-23 today or through June 30th, that is the responsibility of IOAI. So if you like the IOAI process, go ahead and submit it before July 1st. That is going to be their responsibility. Our responsibility begins when there is a new request starting July 1st. So I'm just going to type that in. We'll continue.
And as Gerald and his team members supporting behind the scene continue to answer these questions, I got a really interesting one here. Is this an annual submission process, or is this ICAP submitted by grant, asked by the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission?
So this kind of goes back to our initial presentation, which is it is an annual, and if it's by grant, it's probably the consultant rate, because each project is procured by different consultants. So I don't know too much about the details, but basically per 2 CFR, you do have to submit an application on an annual basis if you want to claim overhead costs for local agencies.
And in the answered tab, if you look, if you click on the button that says show all under the question, then your answer will appear. And we can see that Ben is behind the scenes supporting Gerald and answering your questions.
And Neil, I believe we also have a polling question as well, correct?
Bring up the poll.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing.
Feel free to read the poll out loud, Gerald, if you wish.
Oh, sure. Okay.
And give us the answer. We got a little bit of a split here, Gerald. So go ahead and clarify the question and the answer, if you would, please.
Sure. Number 1 says, which Caltrans office is responsible for consultant A&E rates? So when you look at slide 3 of our presentation, we had that question where the consultant rate, which is the A&E indirect cost rate, is the responsibility of Independent Office of Audits and Investigations. That is not our responsibility. And in fact, David Wong is going to be the one presenting that consultant rate. So the answer is IOAI. I can't seem to move over to the next question.
Oh, yeah, let me end the poll.
Oh, okay, sorry.
And we're going to share the results.
Okay. And okay.
And then I'll launch the next one.
Okay. Awesome. Yep. The majority of the people answered the right question. Great. Next question.
You bet. There you are.
Okay. Which Caltrans office is responsible for agency rate reviews? So that is also from our slide 3 on our PowerPoint. And the responsibility for agency rate review is Caltrans Internal Audits Office. So we are responsible for the agency rate reviews. And what was the answer to?
Oh, yeah, they did much better on this poll.
I'm glad that everybody's reading the PowerPoint, because we want to make sure properly define whose responsibility it is and avoid any miscommunications. And then I believe there's a third question, correct?
You bet. So I'll end this poll. We'll quickly share the results. Well done. I'll stop sharing. And here's your final poll, Gerald.
Okay. So, which Caltrans office is responsible for agency rate audits? So I'll go ahead and wait until everybody answers it. I do want to point out the answer is on slide 4 of the PowerPoint. And I want to be clear that we are responsible for the review aspect of the indirect cost rate or the submission reviews. And so IOAI is responsible for auditing the agency rates. So if you get a phone, if someone calls me and say, "Hey, we're being audited by IOAI on the agency rate," then that's not our responsibility. Our objective is, number one, to meet the compliance of 2 CFR 200. Number 2, we want to develop a process to speed up the review of the local government rates. And also our third objective is to provide IOAI a risk assessment based on the reviews that we received throughout the year and based on our specific methodology. And IOAI is going to be the one deciding which agency they would elect to audit. So the audit aspect of it is not our responsibility. We just provide them some of the information. At the end of the day, it's their decision because they're independent to decide which agency for them to audit. Any other questions?
Before we move to our next presenter, I want to say that, yes, we will. I'm responding to a couple of questions real fast here in the Q&A open tab. We will, in our transcript, also be answering all of the questions in writing that were answered orally. That's part of what we do with these transcripts. And then let's try and fit, and also Gerald's going to put his contact information over in the chat one more time, which you'll get in the transcripts, which is in his presentations, so that you can follow up with him and his team to describe in a little bit more detail when an example of this form would need to be submitted. If you haven't got that out of the presentation materials thus far, do your research at the links he's provided and give him a call with the contact information number that he's provided. Let me see if we can get one last question in here before we move over to Daniel there, Gerald. Does this process that you described supersede figuring out who the cognizant agency is?
So in terms of the cognizant agency, it varies. Like, for example, if you're a tribal, then there is a specific cognizant agency. So it could be depending on what your government type is. And also, it may vary every year because you may receive direct federal funding from various agencies from year to year. And there's a chance that they may be your cognizant agency.
Awesome. Thank you. Lots of content once again. So keep your eyes peeled for the video copy of today's proceedings, the transcript, the attachment with all the links and so forth and so on. Thank you, Gerald. Greatly appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, Daniel, let's go ahead and pivot to you.
Hey, thank you so much, Neil. Can everybody hear me?
I'm great.
Thank you.
We got you.
My name is Daniel Burke. I'm with the Office of Guidance and Oversight in the Division of Local Assistance. in the program reviews and outreach branch, and here's how to reach me via email. Again, the presentations have been made available in the shared file location. As Don Batista mentioned, please visit our local assistance website, which is right here. It has a plethora of information about programs, policy, guidance, and also training, where we have some wonderful trainings that are recorded, PowerPoints, and Q&As. Before I talk about indirect cost allocation plan, efficiencies and best practices, I want to cover some information that was provided to me a couple weeks ago by our friends at the Independent Office of Audits and Investigations, or IOAI. So far this year for 2021-22, they've issued acceptance letters for 106 submitted ICAPs. Included within those 106 submissions is 298 rates over various fiscal years, as Gerald had discussed. Depending on which of the 4 methodologies you use, you could be looking at a past year's rate, which you're trying to develop, which would be the final rate, or you could be looking to a forward-year rate, such as the fixed cost rate with carry forward. So within those 106 submitted ICAPs, there's over 298 rates. And so various agencies, depending on their size and how they're structured, might have various rates for various departments or divisions. You know, you might have an engineering or a capital improvement division, or maintenance, stormwater, etc. So there will be various rates submitted within each indirect cost allocation plan. And as Gerald had presented and discussed, hey, the fixed indirect cost rate with carry forward was the most common. And again, if you are submitting a rate that was approved by another cognizant agency, you still may have the fixed indirect cost rate filed with them as well. So there's currently, and this was as of about 2 weeks ago or so, there were 4 open ICAP reviews being reviewed by IOAI, and they were all submitted in May 2022. So they're doing an excellent job in being responsive and either accepting those rates or providing reasons why it's not, and requesting the additional information from your agency. And the typical review period was 30 to 60 days. So there's a pretty quick turnaround there. So great job, IOAI. So we talked about the submission statistics. Let's talk about some of the audit statistics for 2021-22. So far, there have been 3 final audit reports issued for ICAP, or sometimes we also say indirect cost rate plan audits. And those were actually conducted by the California Department of Finance on behalf of IOAI. And there's an additional 5 ICAP audits that are currently in progress. So we're waiting to hear back on those and crossing our fingers. Hey, hopefully all of our agencies did well. And this information that I'm going to be presenting next is going to be secondhand information, because you have your procedures in place and you're doing an excellent job. Let's talk about areas where my branch within the program reviews and outreach branch and division of local assistance can assist you with. So over a 6-year history, we did a trend, and we noticed that there were 3 very common ICAP findings, which explains some of the deficiencies here. And we have a spreadsheet for common audit deficiencies. And this again is included within our website. And give it a moment here while it loads. I'm going to reduce the screen here so we don't go blind. And so this was our common audit deficiencies and best practices matrix that we updated in April 2021. A year later, not much has changed. So these are still the most common high-risk areas and still the best practices to help mitigate some of the risk of those findings. And on the top here, we have the various columns. We have major finding topic, common findings. So these would be the 3 most common findings, or 4 or 5. It just depends on what category you're going into. The major finding topic, local assistance procedure manual or federal requirement, where it provides the guidance or regulation, the requirement reference, so that'll provide you the direct link, and then best practices to mitigate those findings. We do have them in a specific order. These are the most frequent that occur, and still a year later, it's still the same. If we scroll down, we find the indirect cost rate proposal, the 3 highest deficiency risk items here, which are ineligible costs in the indirect cost pool, the direct cost pool, and also with the carry forward, which is our most highly requested rate. These items are regulated within Title II, Section 200 of the Code of Federal Regulations, and also Section 5.3 of the Local Assistance Procedures Manual, or LAPM, as you'll see abbreviated here throughout our various presentations. We have links to those pages. And if we scroll over here to the right under the best practices column, you'll see that our best practices are to develop procedures and to follow those procedures and make sure they're distributed for new and old staff. And I think this affects all of our agencies. We all have a lot of turnover. And the best way to have and to prevent risk from that turnover is to succession plan. And part of that succession planning is to develop procedures that everybody can view and walks through the processes. So make sure you have your procedures, make sure the costs are in compliance with 2 CFR 200 and segregated between direct, indirect, and what's unallowable and cannot be included in your rate submissions to Gerald, meaning the next fiscal year. And then also detailed steps for the rate calculations and how you're going to develop your methodology. So, please go through this site and, make sure you bookmark our local assistance page up here. I'm going to go back up here to the top here. Make sure you bookmark both of these sites, as they do have a lot of good information. You may not even need to call Caltrans or ask us the questions. So again, a lot of information, probably more than we care about. Direct and indirect costs. So these are two of our highest or most common deficient items. But let's understand what they are first before we go a little more in depth into them. So a direct cost is identified with a particular final cost objective. When we're talking about final cost objective, for most of our intents and purposes, it's going to be a federal award or a federally funded project. And this is the federal definition again. And so typically we'll see the directed costs associated with salary, benefits, materials, equipment used on a project. If your agency is doing a rehabilitation project, you need to pay for that staff and their time that's spent on the project, their benefits, the materials such as asphalt, and any equipment depreciation that's used on the project, such as a backhoe or a steamroller. So those can be traced down, hopefully, to the individual final cost objective, such as the federal award. On the other hand, we have indirect costs. The indirect costs are incurred for common or joint purposes that may benefit more than one cost objective, or for our intents and purposes here, there may be one or more federal awards, or they may not even apply to federal awards. And again, here we have some useful links for you: 2 CFR 200-413 for the direct cost definitions, and 2 CFR Appendix 7, where it goes a little more into the indirect cost definition and methodology. So here we have what the typical indirect costs are: facilities, so lease, utilities. You might have an engineering staff who works in the facility. You're not going to parse out their individual time and parse down the cost of rents, utilities broken out by that. It's a little inefficient. We don't expect many agencies to do that, and that's why it's recommended you capture that cost within an indirect cost rate. If you do that as a whole, it's going to take and benefit more than one cost objective. It's going to benefit all of your federal aid projects, and might also benefit some of your other locally sponsored projects as well. And also your administration. We're not sure if your agency directorate, your public works director, city manager, etc. We're not sure if they charge down by each project by project, or if they just have one overhead rate, which then can be parsed out and charged indirectly to multiple cost objectives. That's a unique tool for that. The same goes with your accounting and HR. Of course, your employees are going to need to have an accounting office and HR office to back them up. So we often see that facilities and administration are typically incurred with more than one cost objective or benefit, and therefore it is recommended those costs be applied into your indirect cost rates. Let's go into one of the more complex concepts, which is carry forward. Carry forward is used only on the fixed with carry forward ICRP basis. It's a negotiated and approved ICAP for a future fiscal year. It is clearly defined here in cost allocation plans within Appendix 5 to 2 CFR 200. Let's take an example here. So after July 2022, you're starting to complete the form that you're going to submit to Gerald and his team at CHOW. Your agency is going to estimate. Obviously, you do not have the actuals for fiscal year 2022-23 of your direct and indirect cost pools. And you're going to develop that rate for approval for fiscal year 2022-2023. So all costs that will be incurred or charged within fiscal year 2022-23, excuse me, incurred only through fiscal year 2022-2022. So what you're working on at that time. And again, the carry forward is only applied on a fixed with carry forward indirect cost allocation plan basis. Okay, so great, we have our estimates, but what happens in reality? What happens when the costs are actually incurred? Well, at the end of your fiscal year, you're going to be reconciling the actuals at the end of the estimated fiscal year. So for example, you prepared your estimates for fiscal year 2022-2023. So after your accounting office closes out fiscal year 2023 for the majority of public agencies in the state, about over 90% of us use the July 1 through June 30th fiscal year. So let's say, July, August 2023, you're closing out those accounting months, periods, the end of the fiscal year. You're going to be going ahead and reconciling what your actuals were. Once you have the results of the actual carry forward amount, you're going to be applying that into fiscal years. And we're going to kind of walk through a simple process here to kind of highlight what those steps are. And again, this methodology can be a higher risk of error, and we'll get into that in just a moment as well. Not including the carry forward in future, one of the more common deficiencies is not including the carry forward in future ICAP submittals. So again, it's really important we capture the actual carry forward from the estimated year. So what typically happens and what we see is the agencies may not have subtracted the actual or from the approved rates, from the approved carry forward rates that was submitted in the past to IOAI or will be submitted in the future to CHOW. So an example here, we have the 2021-22 actual costs. So these will be calculated again after July 2022, less the estimates that were submitted for the 2021-22 estimated costs. And these need to be applied to your carry forward, either added or subtracted out, depending on what your results are, on the 2023-24 ICAP submission. So again, it occurs 2 years later, as Gerald was discussing, and as I'm discussing right now. One of the other high-risk items with the carry forward and the deficiencies is misclassifying direct and or indirect costs. And this will impact your carry forward calculation, of course, because if the costs are misclassified, it's going to adjust your direct and indirect cost rate actuals and estimates. So it's a little higher risk, but it is a more efficient process and allows our agencies to charge out their indirect cost rates immediately and not having to wait till after the fiscal year to start claiming those. So here we have an example of a carry forward rate spreadsheet here. This is just kind of like a nice summarized spreadsheet, what we call a lead schedule in the auditing world. And this is for fiscal year 2019-20. So this is being prepared. And up here we have the salary and wages that are being estimated or proposed for 2019-20 and would be submitted to Gerald. Well, in the past it's been IOAI, but now moving forward, we're going to be submitting those to Gerald and CHOW. And here we have the estimated indirect cost rates. And we have the indirect cost rate pool total down here. And we have the carry forward. What we notice here is that the actual from 17-18, again, carry forward 2 years into 2019-20 is where we're going to apply the carry forward rate, or the carry forward amount rather. And we notice here that it's a negative number, which means the actual was less than the estimated. So you're going to be carrying forward a reduction to your indirect cost rates. And so that's what our auditors want to see. That's what Gerald wants to see when you're submitting your current proposed rates. That's what our auditors want to see when they're going through and they're actually looking at the details and performing the audit, on site or remotely. And that'll help to calculate to an accurate indirect cost rate number. This is a lot to go through, and it might help to digest and think about it a couple days, or if you have questions, we'll get to those in just a short moment. Give me a moment here. My PowerPoint has decided to stop cooperating. All right, much better. So summary, what are some best practices that we can do? Develop procedures for calculating the ICAP submission as stated in the Common Audit Deficiencies Matrix. Then we need to pay attention to the procedures within 2 CFR 200, especially subpart E. I believe it's 2 CFR 200 point about starts at 421, 422 or so, where it talks about the specific allowable costs and defines them out. That'll help you, ensure and do a nice little double check peer review to make sure your costs are eligible and included in there. Make sure you include the dates and application of your reconciliation procedures that are fixed with carry forward ICAP methodologies used. Again, make sure you have your methodology just laid out and easy access for not only the auditors at IOAI, but you may also want, or upon request from Gerald's office from Chow, to submit that as well. And make sure that your procedures are easily accessible, such as on a shared drive, and your staff can access them and are trained on the procedures. So thank you so much for listening to this. I know this is some very dry material. Let's go into the Q&A and see if there were any questions concerning my presentation. So I'm going to start with Bahadur from District 4. Hello, Bahadur. Great to see you're participating in this conversation. So he asked, so they're submitting, an agency submitting 2019-20. Should not the carry forward be from 18-19? That answer is no, not at this time, because you do not know what your actuals will be typically in 18-19, and that's why we request the carry forward in 2 years. Basically, a lot of the agencies will like to provide the carry forward in, do the calculations maybe in July or August, and also submit the estimates at the same time. And it might actually take a little bit longer to get the carry forward actually tallied out and totaled up. So generally speaking, it's pushed out about 2 years. So, okay, so we're going to Italo Jimenez from County of Santa Cruz. Thank you for asking me your questions, Italo. The example is a 2-year calculation carry forward, but you are using the fiscal year 17-18, which makes it a 4-year calculation. Can you clarify? So that the actual year from the sample that I provided was 19-20. So 17-18, 18-19 would be the year when you're going to start pulling up what your actuals were, and you're going to apply that to 19-20 under the typical submissions. So it's actually a 2-year calculation. But I know this is, and it's still a good question because I know it's a lot of information to digest and it still may be unclear. So I'm glad you brought that up, and glad I have a chance to hopefully re-explain and just re-hammer the point home about how to submit the fixed with carry forward rate. So again, you're going to use the estimates on the approved ICAP submission that you received from either IOAI or Chow. And again, you're going to subtract that from your actual amounts. So to David Hicks's question next, to confirm local agencies only need to submit ICAP indirect costs that are desired for federal reimbursement. I believe this can also apply to state funds as well. So I believe they're applicable to both. I see there's a note here from the producer, but let me also just research that as well. So that's all I pretty much had here. I'm going to turn it back over to Neil. Thank you so much for your time, everybody.
And thank you. We really appreciate you joining us, Daniel. Again, more complex content from local assistance. Let me try and see if we can squeeze one more in there. This is a question from Sue. If we use an estimate, then we potentially under bill on projects. How would we true up the actuals on our project that closes if our basis is a span of over 2 years?
That's an excellent question, Sue, and that's a trade-off your agency would want to consider. Alternatively, you can use the fixed rate, which will pretty much be the approved rate unless audited at a later point in time. And hopefully you've done everything correctly. You've followed some of our best practices today, and your staff is trained up, and it's a lot to undertake. It's really difficult to get it 100% perfectly right. And hopefully you follow those procedures and your rate is correct. But the only problem with using the final rate rather is that you're not going to be receiving the approval until after those costs are known. So for example, for 2021-22, in all likelihood, you may not be submitting that until after August 2022. So you're not going to be recovering those costs or be unable to recover those costs for at least another year. The benefit of using an indirect cost with fixed carry forward is you're going to be recovering your estimated, proposed, and approved, not approved, but accepted amounts by IOAI or CHAL. And then if there are any differences, you're going to be truing that up by inserting in that carry forward addition or difference if you estimate it a little bit high. So again, you'll be recovering that every 2 years or so from that year rate. In actuality, you'll be making that recovery every year because remember, in every submission for every year, you're going to have that and use that carry forward rate. I'm trying to see if I can explain it any different or better. So for your submission in 2021-22 with the fixed with carry forward, you're going to be truing up that 2018-19 rate and any costs you may have missed or underestimated. Now for 2022-23, you're going to be doing the same thing with the 2022-2023 rate. You're doing the same thing with the 2020-21 estimated rate that you had submitted to IOAI. It's a little, let me see if I can go back into my slides here. Make sure this is cooperating with me. Okay, so again, this is the 1920 rate. Here we're truing up the estimates submitted for the 17-18. So here you're making the recovery or putting a little additional back in if you underestimated, which we see here is in parentheses, that was an underestimate. What would be positive if you did not estimate enough? I'm sorry, this is an overestimate. This is an overestimate for 17-18, which occurred right here. Because again, your actuals were lower than your estimates, so we got to subtract out that difference for the 2019-20 year up here. So for 2020-21, when that was submitted, you'll be using the 18-19. So you'll be essentially recovering or increasing that rate every single year. So it will truly balance out, but it'll just balance out at a later time and date. But the nice thing is you get to recover those rates immediately.
And for the sake of time, so we don't encroach upon the next speaker, I just wanted to note that we've already answered 34 questions, and we still have 7 live unanswered questions. So as we move forward to David, who's going to give us a little snapshot of this process, but over on the consultant A&E side, Daniel and company will continue to try and answer your questions. And of course, even questions answered live will be provided in writing in the transcripts along with the links and so forth as a part of the after action for today's venue. Okay, so we got Stephen, and I'm sure we got David Wong back there behind the scenes someplace. And your guys' item is going to be a financial document review process for A&E consultants. Guys, take it away. Thank you, Daniel.
David, are you going to open?
The PowerPoint looks great.
Right.
We can hear you great, Stephen. And we can see you great there, David.
Okay, you see my screen? So, am I ready?
Got you.
All right.
You're up.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is David Wong, and I'm one of the audit chief with the Independent Office of Audits and Investigations. So hopefully by now, everyone know that we have 2 separate audit offices. I want to thank Gerald for trying to clarify the differences between CHAL, which stands for Caltrans Internal Audit Office, and we're IOAI. So just it wasn't part of my presentation, but I want to give you guys a quick background, just so we could differentiate between my office and Gerald's office. So IOAI was established in 2017 by Senate Bill 1 to provide independent oversight of state and federal transportation funds. If you guys are interested in, trying to find our authority, we got authority due the government code 14460 to 14463. So right now, our office is responsible for reviewing architectural engineering cost proposals and issuing the A&E indirect cost rates before contracts are executed by the local public agencies. So in short, we're responsible for reviewing consultant rates. So we call this process what we do financial document reviews, FDR for short, but it's not to be confused with final delivery report on construction projects. So we want to kind of go over, provide overview of our review process and go over some of the reasons for delays. Let's go over to the next screen. So on the screen is our contact information. Luisa Vivakova is the audit manager over this area. She will be monitoring the Q&A inbox and answering any questions as we go along. In addition, we have Steve Castillo will help me with this presentation. So Steve is a retired mutant, but he has many years working both in Caltrans and SANDAG, and is very familiar with our FDR process. He obviously has seen both the Caltrans and the local government side. Right now, he's working with us to improve our review process and also apply Paycheck Protection Program loan forgiveness requirements. So on the HUC here, we have the email inbox. This is the inbox where the local government, local public agencies are submit their financial document reviews, packages, and also ask any questions about our process. So I will turn it over to Steve to go over the rest of this presentation and go over our review process and discuss some of our process change. Steve?
Thank you, David. Yeah, like David said, I started my career with SANDAG back in the late 80s, and I worked there, with Caltrans and worked there for 13 years. And I used to do a lot of pre-awards. We called them pre-awards back there and back then, and just to assist the department to make sure we were getting fair and reasonable prices from the consultants. And then I finished my career with SANDAG in 12 years, and I assisted with looking at these FDRs and helping our procurement arm navigate through it and get executed contracts. And I know that's what all the local agencies want to do, is make sure they got fair and reasonable rates and execute their contracts as soon as possible. So I got hired last year as a retired annuitant, coming back and basically to see if we could do things more efficiently and still while complying with the federal regulations. So the purpose of this presentation is to provide you a general overview of IOAI's review process. I'm not going to go into specifics. I just want to go ahead and touch on the following topics. As we just, our previous Gerald and Daniel talked about the local assistance procedure manual. I was going to talk a little bit about that and cover what chapter that you should be focused on for that relate to our reviews, and drill down a little bit into what's an indirect cost rate financial review, the parties included in the indirect cost rate review. So talk a little bit about Exhibit 10A. It's a key document that local agencies need to submit to us to kind of initiate the review process. Then I'm going to go into the reasons why our reviews are delayed based on the risk assessment analysis that I did and other things. And then talk about what kind of process improvements we got in the works. And then we're going to touch on a new topic that's resurfaced in last couple of years, the PPE loan forgiveness program, and how that impacts A&E consultants and LPAs when we do these reviews. So the next slide. The local assistance procedure manual describes the various procedures required to process federal and state funded local transportation projects. Local agencies that are receiving these funds and use it to reimburse A&E consultants must follow the selection and contracting procedures detailed in Chapter 10. 10.1.3 outlines the audit and review process for A&E contracts that anytime use state and local funds. And this is where you'll find all the procedures that we follow, and also responsibilities that LPAs and consultants are documented in this section. It's very important that the local agencies understand these requirements. We got a link right there where you could go ahead and click on, and it'll take you right to chapter 10. Next slide, David. So what are indirect cost rate financial reviews? A&E reviews the consultant's indirect cost rate included in LPA contract. So if we receive, currently, if we receive a what's written in the local procedure manual, if we receive a contract of over 150K, we will look at the indirect cost rates for the prime and sub consultants to make sure they comply with the federal cost principles and make sure they're fair and reasonable, and we review all of them. For under 150K, contracts that are under 150K, the local agencies have the responsibility to review those costs, the proposed costs, and make sure they're fair and reasonable. So when we do our review, we will look at each one of the consultants. We will communicate with the consultants and verify that the proposed indirect cost rate is supported by their supporting documentation. And after we review that, we will accept their rate or adjust their rate using a risk-based approach. And currently, we are only focused on the consultants' indirect cost rates. In the past, we were reviewing cost proposal and prevailing wage policies, but as part of my review, I determined that this is a procurement activity that should be handled by the local agencies' procurement offices. And just one note, recently, as part of my review also, we are going to change the threshold of the contracts that we review to $1 million, and I'll cover that a little bit later in the presentation. So next slide, David. So the three parties involved in this financial document review would be the local agencies, the consultants, and us, IOAI. And you know, Division of Local Assistance doesn't get involved in the normal review process. They may get involved if there's specific exceptions are that we have to address, but normally they are not involved in this process. So I want to first go over the local agencies' responsibilities. Next slide, David. So local agencies are responsible for obtaining all the required indirect cost rate supporting information from the A&E primes and consultants. And Exhibit 10A, which is referenced in the Chapter 10 manual, basically gives you a checklist of what needs to be obtained from these consultants. And the consultants fall under 5 categories. And the categories are listed within this Exhibit 10A. And based on the category, that's what type of documentation they need to submit. Then the consultants, once they feel that they got all the documentation, they should perform a quality check of the documentation to ensure the information is correct. Because if the information isn't correct or there's missing information, in the past we were rejecting these submitted packages. It would go back to the LPAs to get the information, and they would have to resubmit the whole packages. And this would just delay the process. And as part of when I was working for SANDAG, this was a frustrating aspect of the procedure. So we need to make sure, LPAs need to make sure, and also I would push it to the prime consultants and have them make sure they do a quality check so we don't have any missing documentation. And then once you feel you have a completed package, you submit it to IOI for review, and basically it's submitted through the inbox that David showed the initial contact information, or you could also mail it. Okay, go ahead, next slide, David. So the consultants need to also refer to 10A, and based on the checklist, they need to provide all the documents that are listed. I didn't want to get into the specific documentation on 10A. There's a bullet list of based on the categories of what needs to be submitted. If there's any questions, Q&As, we'll be happy to answer that at the end of the presentation. So one of the main keys is these internal the ICR schedules need to be prepared in the accrual basis of accounting. And this is kind of getting in the arena of accounting practices, but there's accrual basis and there's cash basis. And several times we'll receive indirect cost rate schedules that are based on the cash basis, and that would be an automatic rejection because the requirements, they need to be on an accrual basis. And also in chapter 10, we provide figure 10.3 provides an example of how these indirect cost rate schedules need to be presented in a specific format. And if they're not in that format, again, that would be grounds for our staff to reject it and make sure it's in that format. And when we get the packages and we start dealing with the primes, usually we assign it to the auditors. The auditors will contact the prime sub-consultants, and they are and they may request additional information, and we expect the consultants to make sure that they submit that information to us in a timely manner. Okay, David, the next slide. So first, when we get our packages, we screen them and make sure we got all the information. And you know, a lot of times that we don't have the information, and sometimes it deals with missing 10, what we call 10-K, which is certification to the indirect cost rate. We also have missing other information, AASHTO requirements, internal controls, trial balances. There's a bullet list that our staff go through and they check. And if it's missing, in the past it has been sent back and make sure we got a complete package. Now, once we do have a complete package, we send it to our auditors. Our auditors will notify the consultants that they're assigned to it, and they're assigned to review the documentation submitted. We'll also notify the LPAs what auditor is assigned to the review, just so they know. And then we will review the proposed ICRs. The auditors, based on the circumstances, will implement certain review procedures and verify, make sure that the proposed rate is supported and it is based on the current year. And then once we complete our review, we will send an email to the LPAs in writing whether the proposed indirect cost rates are accepted or adjusted. And those rates should be used in the contracts for at least the first year under review for that period. Okay, go ahead, Dave. Next slide. So Exhibit 10A is basically the transmittal document. It's a lead document, as I previously discussed. It has all the information that we need, the contract information, the list of the consultants with the estimated participation amounts. A lot of these times, these consultants, you know, they'll say, we don't know what the participation amounts will be based on, a lot of these will be specific rates of compensation that are driven by task orders. So we tell them, hey, you just need to estimate it as best as you can, and then include that on the Exhibit 10A, and we'll just move forward based on that. And again, the categories drives the documentation requirements on what needs to be submitted. So the next slide will talk about the reasons why these financial reviews are delayed. And as I stated, that we're missing our incomplete documentation. Sometimes one of the requirements we have is the prime consultants on these contracts must have a CPA audited report. And a lot of times we will get the submittal and they do not have that CPA audited report, and that's just automatic grounds for rejection because that's a requirement. Sometimes, you know, you might be familiar with the safe harbor rate. It's a program that's been set up to allow these smaller firms that don't have indirect cost rates to go ahead and accept a rate of 100, and it used to be 110, now it moved up to 120 for home office and 90 for field office, to get them in to be a part of these contracts. But they only have a 3-year period before they should be developing their rate and getting that information available. Now, if they go over that 3-year period, we will reject them and say that you cannot use the safe harbor rate. That's another example. Sometimes the participation amounts don't always equal the total contract amount, but there's a bullet list of these type of reasons why we reject them. Then, you know, other reasons is we've got a large number of consultants on these contracts. You know, they could vary. Some of these contracts will have 3 to 5 consultants. Some will have up to 30 consultants. Well, as you know, if it's 30 consultants versus 5 consultants, it's just going to take the auditors longer to navigate through them and get all the information they need. Sometimes we got timings of submittals. We can't control when the LPA submit their requests, and sometimes we'll get a lot of requests at a specific time period, and other times we won't get as much. So that drives delays also. And another delay that happens is the consultants are not timely in their response to provide the information to our auditors. You know, when I was doing this reviews, I used to deal just directly with the prime consultant and told them to follow up with the sub-consultants because, you know, the primes are eager to get their contracts executed and they will push the subs to get the information available. So these are kind of the certain reasons why these things are being delayed. David, next slide. So as I stated, so when I came in here, I started looking at the process, and as probably some of you have experienced some frustration with the process previously, it's evolved over time. I experienced the same frustration when I worked for Sandag, and I said, why is it being done this way? We kind of had a new inspector general that came in, and while it was acting inspector general, we said, well, let's check the process if we could change it. So we started looking at it, and we're making some changes that are currently in the works. The first one I said is the contract submittal threshold has been moved to $1 million. So if you have contracts that are under $1 million, we don't need to see them anymore. Now they're being submitted to us right now because the LAPM says 150K. We're sending an email back to the LPAs and informing them that we're waiving the reviews. We're working with DLA, Division of Local Assistance, to get this messaging to the LPAs through an office bulletin that should be coming. I'm anticipating in next month or maybe shortly after that kind of explains that. And we're also requiring list documentation from the consultants. You know, like one example, if we have a consultant that has a CPA audited report, we just want to see the CPA audit report and have them certified to that report. Previously, we would ask for the AASHTO ICQ questionnaire, post-trial balances, and a lot of documentation that I thought was unwarranted because the auditors that issued the CPA report already did that type of review. Then we improved our intake process. We talked to our staff and we said, you know what, if they've missed a few documents or there's minor exceptions, let's go ahead and instead of sending them back to the LPAs, send it to the auditors, inform the LPAs of the missing documentations, and have the auditors follow up and make sure we get that, so to keep the process moving. And hopefully that's going to reduce the delays we have. Now, if the LPAs just missed the boat on it and they just have a lot of exceptions on that, we will reject them and we will send them back to the LPAs to get them corrected. Now we're going to start focusing on consultants with higher proposed estimated contract amounts. Before, if we received a contract over $150,000, if the consultant had an $8,000 estimated contract amount, we would look at them. But now we're just going to start looking at consultants over $500,000, and anything under that, the LPAs need to look at the lower dollar amounts and make sure they're fair and reasonable. And you know, we did analysis, and we think we could get more bang for our audit resources is just focusing on the higher consultants. And now we're also notifying the LPAs of the expected completion dates. In the past, you know, when I worked for Sandag, I never knew when these things would get done, and I would get a lot of calls from our procurement unit asking, and I just didn't have the answer. So now we made a process change, and we're notifying these LPAs when we expect to get these done. And this is all contingent on we're getting responsibility from the consultants and their timing in their response. Go ahead, David, the next slide. So a new issue has surfaced in recent years that needs to be addressed. The payment protection program that was established by the federal government. In general terms, firms were allowed to borrow money to keep their employees employed during the pandemic. Subsequently, the federal government allowed forgiveness of these loans. They were initially loans and they were expected to be paid back, but the federal government allowed firms to apply for forgiveness and get forgiveness, and they didn't have to pay back the loans. Well, when the loans were forgiven, FHWA had instructed the state DOTs, you know, Caltrans, us, that adjustments to the ICRs needed to be made to comply with federal cost principles. Then Caltrans recently provided supplemental guidance of how these need to be handled. I'm not going to go into the specifics on making the adjustments, but just to alert you that our auditors will be requesting certain information from the consultants that are listed on the contracts. And DLA plans to also include this, some wording and discussion and message this out that through an office bulletin that this issue it needs to be addressed. So that completes my presentation, and Neil, we could go ahead and turn it over, and you could maybe walk us through the questions if we have any questions that we need to answer.
That's great. For the sake of time, as always, we got a lot of information here, and there's a lot of nuances. And the whole purpose of these sort of short courses or mini trainings, as it were, is to kind of give you the highlights and point to where you can get more information or participate with us in more in-depth or full-length trainings on all of the details. Many of our trainings have exercises where you can actually fill out forms and practice and get some real hands-on time with folks like David and Stephen. Now, Stephen, we got one question I'll ask you to handle before we go to break. If a contract is submitted for review in August of 2021, would the A10 10K CPA audited rate needs to be for the 2021 fiscal year rate?
Yes, anything after July 1st, I'm sorry, this is 2021. So that would be the consultant's fiscal year, calendar year. They usually do it by calendar years. It'd be the 2020 year.
Very good. And then just one reminder before we go on break. A big part of why we do these trainings and have these policies and procedures is to help you succeed. But this is a partnership, and we need your help. And so, for example, as the moderator, if we ask you to put your questions in the Q&A versus the chat, please put your questions in the Q&A. An example of why this is important is because you're going to fill out forms, and if you don't follow the instructions, we're going to have to bounce it back to you. And that's going to cost you time. It's going to cost you money. And sometimes the process is onerous. Sometimes the process is difficult. Sometimes we might not even understand or like the process, but we got to follow it. And the only way that we're going to help you succeed is if you help us by following that guidance, following the directions on our forms, and so forth. So I'd like to reiterate, for those of us that have questions, we would be happy to answer them. And we would love to make them a part of the transcript for this event, which we will be posting along with a copy of the full video of today's event if you put your questions in the Q&A box as requested. So again, a big part of how local assistance works is following the process. And if you follow the process, you're going to do great. So make sure that I've done my job to clarify that. We put links, contact information, and so forth in the chat, and we put questions so that they can be answered over in the Q&A box. Okay. Looks like we got 46 answered questions thus far. Let's go ahead and go on break. Sheriff, you can put on a timer. Everybody can go take a little bit of a stretch, use the restroom if needed, top off your coffee, or do whatever else you need to do. And we will resume here in just a few minutes. Thank you so much. That'll be a 10-minute timer. Thank you. So welcome back from break, everyone. Packed program, as you might imagine, once again. Again, just to reiterate a couple things, very, very summary information we're providing here. Full in-depth trainings on all of this available. These short courses, again, are intended to give you the highlights, the contact information, the links to resources, so you can dig into the details deeper in other fuller actual training formats. We're going to move on with Bing's presentation next, and I would like to reiterate the importance of using the Q&A for any questions you'd like us to respond to, so we can make sure that they're a part of the transcripts. Bing?
All right, thanks, Neil. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Bing Liu. I'm with the Division of Local Assistance, A&E Oversight Branch. So today, we'll just very briefly go through a few items. One is just a very short introduction to A&E Oversight, who we are and what we do. I'll go over a little bit of the Exhibit 10C submittal, which is a consultant procurement checklist. And then I'll just very, very briefly highlight a few of the low compliance areas that we've found in the past few years. So who are we? We are the A&E Oversight Branch under the Office of Guidance and oversight. We have several staff members in this group. Besides myself, Bing Liu, we have Tay Pham, John Yang, and Yu Yung Choi, who unfortunately had his assignment ended last week. He had to return to his other permanent job, so he's no longer with our group. And then we also have Quen Ngo and Hip Nguyen. So I have a slide at the end of the presentation that gives a little bit more detail on all of us. So what do? We basically provide guidance and oversight on the A&E procurement process for federal and state-funded projects. So why do we do that? We have a stewardship and oversight agreement with FHWA to make sure that agencies follow the regulations and requirements of the 23 Code of Federal Regulations 172. As part of our oversight process, we have an exhibit, a database called the 10C, which again is called the A&E Consultant Contract Checklist. It's essentially a mechanism, oversight mechanism for us to make sure that agencies are following the appropriate procurement process. So again, that's to assist LPAs, local agencies, to comply with federal regulations and state laws. Who needs to submit it? The local agencies. When do you submit it? Prior to the contract execution award, and no later than the first invoice that the agency wants to submit for reimbursement. How do you submit the 10C? First of all, the agency needs to sign up and activate an account. You can do that with the following email on here, aeoversight@dot.ca.gov, and request the account. Someone from our office will respond by stating that the account has been activated, and then you can complete and fill out the 10C form and submit it online at that address noted on there. I did want to note that agencies need to keep in mind that there is only one account per agency. So if you have multiple staff working on consultant contracts, you'll need to share the account name and password with the rest of staff. So when you activate the account and you log in order to submit the information regarding the consultant contract, here is the home screen. On the upper left button here, if you hit that button, it'll take you to a very useful A&E informational webpage, resource webpage that we have. It will contain a lot of the information probably that agencies would need in order to have your questions answered. We also have a couple of other buttons here. This button is to actually start filling out a blank and to create a new 10C form. And then this other button is a summary list of all 10Cs that are submitted. So let's go over a little bit of what the 10C form is. It basically contains two main information. One is the project information, and the other is contains different parts of the procurement steps that the agency should have followed in procuring the consultant contract. So the first section is the project information. It's very important that the agency fills out everything completely. Otherwise, when you submit the 10C form, it may not happen if you do not fill out all the required information. So just some of it is self-explanatory, like the contract administrator name, the funding source that you can choose from a drop-down menu, the contract solicitation number, contract type, and then for on-call contracts, you do need to specify the period of time. For on-call contracts, the maximum period is 5 years. And also for on-call contracts, a maximum on-call dollar amount needs to be specified. One of the fields is the 4-digit local agency identifier called the low code, and that needs to be filled in. For example, the County of San Diego, the low code is 5957. So that's the project information section. And then we're going to have like several sections of for the actual procurement information. It's basically 4+1. The 4 parts are procurement planning, full and open competition, qualification-based selection and evaluation criteria, and cost is fair and reasonable. Now, if you do have to submit this 10C because you amended the contract, then there will be a 5th section that you need to fill out, and that is a contract amendment section. So again, all fields are required, but as applicable, obviously there might be some fields that you will leave blank, and that's okay, as long as it's not applicable. Submitting the 10C will still be possible if that's the case. So very quickly, here are the 4 sections of the procurement part. The first part is the procurement planning. Some of the components are policies and procedures, conflict of interest, retaining records and supporting documentation, and then if applicable, consultant in a management support role. So for example, in policies and procedures, the agency needs to formally adopt the Local Assistance Procedure Manual, Chapter 10, and that is done via either a letter from our public, from the agency's Public Works Director or equivalent level manager, or through City Council or County Board resolution. The agency needs to have a conflict of interest policy. And then, for example, if you are hiring the consultant in a management support role, you need to follow certain steps, including the very important approval process from FHWA for a consultant in a management support role, acronym is CMSR. The other section, second section, is the full and open competition. The agency needs to indicate whether it was procured, the consultant was procured competitively or via non-competitive negotiations. Solicitation details, the advertising and solicitation must be done publicly. And then the agency needs to establish the actual evaluation and minimum qualification criteria. It's very important that these evaluation criteria are consistent across all documents, including like the request for a proposal. And then if you have an interview, there must be a consistent set of evaluations. The next 2 sections, the qualification-based selection, the agency needs to indicate whether or not cost and also, qualifications was used. Just very important to note that for any consultant contract, that cost must not be a factor. It must be entirely qualifications based. And then the 4th section is the cost is fair and reasonable. One of the low compliance items that we found is that the independent cost estimate is either missing or lacking, and it must be prepared prior to negotiations. The method of payment must be specified, like lump sum or cost plus fixed fee. A cost analysis must be included, making sure that the costs are allowable. And then this was touched on by the IOAI Independent Office of Audits and Investigations a little bit earlier, in that if the contract is at 150,000 or above, the indirect cost rate financial document review package must be submitted to IOAI, reviewed and accepted by IOAI prior to contract execution. So I think IOAI already provided a good level of detail with their presentation. Then you must have negotiations on cost and fee and so forth. So these are the 4 main sections of the procurement process. Again, this 10C basically is a checklist. It's a summary of the steps that agencies needs to follow in order to meet the guidelines of that Code of Federal Regulations 23 CFR 172. For an amended contract, so in the project information section, if it's amended contract, you'll check this part and then fill in this section, contract modification. Excuse me a moment. So if you are changing your performance period, that is perfectly okay, but you just got to do it prior to the original contract expiration date, obviously. Again, with the on-call contract, there is a maximum 5-year period that must be adhered to. If the cost has changed, then of course the agreement needs to be made prior to the actual execution of the contract amendment. And again, for on-call contracts, it cannot exceed the original maximum amount. And then similar to what was said previously, you need to make sure that costs are fair and reasonable. And if your indirect cost rate has changed, then IOI also needs to review and accept this change to ICR prior to the contract amendment execution. So in a nutshell, that's the contract amendment. I'm not going to really go over this summary list, but if you recall on the home screen, if you hit the summary list button, it will show a summary of all the submitted Exhibit 10Cs, and the fields are kind of self-explanatory with information regarding that contract. Next, I did want to just very, very briefly touch on low compliance areas that we found in the past few years. We do conduct an annual process review where we see, you know, what areas of the procurement process may be a little bit more low compliance and at a little bit higher risk. We found these 5 areas listed here. One is the independent cost estimate. Again, with all these, either the information and documentation is either lacking or missing. The independent cost estimate is very important. It's developed in advance of requesting a cost proposal, and of course, it's a basis for when you negotiate the contract with the consultants. So make sure that the independent cost estimate is there. Price fee negotiations, profit fee. Obviously, profit fee is an important component of a contract. It's a great motivator for the performance of the contract that needs to be there. Cost analysis, the agency needs to ensure that costs are allowable. With these 3, independent cost estimate, price fee negotiations, and cost analysis, the A&E team has created a worksheet tool that agencies can use. Let me just quickly show it to you. Can you also all see this screen? Okay, yeah, so this is the A&E resource webpage. It's got a lot of good information in there, and I'll touch on it in just a little bit again. But down here, we have the tools, the independent cost estimate worksheet, the cost analysis worksheet, and the profit fee determination. Obviously, we don't have time to go through these right now, but I again did want to mention that these tools are available. Please take advantage of these tools. The other 2 low compliance areas that we found are records of procurement and submittals, and basically that has to do with making sure that the consultants were actually responsive to the solicitation. For example, it can be a simple thing such as, did the consultant submit the proposal on time? So the agency needs to have these records of the submittal on file in case there is an audit later. And then lastly, potentially a low compliance area that we found is the consultant, hiring the consultant in a management support role. And mainly that has to do with the actual approval process. Some agencies and staff may not be aware that if you hire a consultant in a management support role, you do need to have FHWA approval. So there has to be approval of the scope of work and a conflict of interest policy prior to advertising and solicitation. And then once FHWA approves that, you can go ahead and advertise. Once subsequently, once you do the consultant selection, before you can execute the contract, you must submit another form called the 10U form. And that kind of like just summarizes again that you understand that there's no conflict of interest when you hire this consultant in a management support role. And this 10U form needs to be approved by FHWA prior to contract execution. So some agencies have missed that, and that is why it is part of our low compliance findings. So in summary, yes.
Could you try to advance your slide? Want to make sure that your slides that your slide is moving along with you, so to speak.
Okay. Yeah. So I am in the low compliance areas, and that is the correct slide.
Okay.
And so we're almost done here. I did want to point out the great guidance and resource webpage that A&E has. We believe that maybe some agencies and staff are not aware of our resource webpage. Let me bring it up again. It may already contain answers to a lot of the questions that you may have. So we've divided into sections here, like guidance. We have a link to our Chapter 10 manual, information regarding the request for proposal, request for qualifications. We have the responsiveness checklist, which was part of one of the low compliance areas that we have. We have the Exhibit 10C, the procurement checklist, posted on here. Resources, we have examples of RFPs, RFQs. We have sample adoption of Chapter 10, like the agency letter or the city council, county board resolution. We have a lot of selected short training videos and webinars already posted on here. So please take advantage of these resources. And then lastly, I did briefly mention the tools and worksheets that we have. So again, please check this resource web page. It may already contain answers to questions that you have about the A&E consultant procurement process.
Bing, thank you so much.
Yes.
Really appreciate all of the contact information, the link to your website. I've seen some of Bing's on-demand training videos that he was just describing. So please do go to that website. A lot of our units have these on-demand videos ready at your fingertips to take the kind of brief summary information that we provide here to the whole next level, really get you into all of the details. Jim, let's go ahead and jump into your piece of the puzzle here.
All right, so thanks, Neil.
Jim will be talking about the final invoice and report of expenditures. Jim?
I was muted, sorry. Okay, so I'm Jim Day from Local Assistance in District 3. I'm not from headquarters, and let's get going. Where's my advance? There's my advance. Okay, what I want you to be able to understand is that we're working with Chapter 5 for invoicing and Chapter 17 for project completion. There is an additional chapter, Chapter 20, but I won't touch on that too much, but that is deficiencies and sanctions. With 5, 17, and 20, you can go through either a federal closeout or a state closeout and understand the consequences as well. Let's get moving on. An RE, a resident engineer who actually was the person who helped deliver that project with the contractor, they're going to have to take a walk. Your public works director or a responsible person in charge from your agency is going to have to take that walk with them and develop a punch list and make sure that the contractor has done exactly as what's required in that. And in that way, you can actually build your final invoice. Okay. This is the inspection form that you would fill out, and we'll be reviewing it as well in local assistance, but it's on you first to walk that mile that you just worked on. Okay, so this is the 17C. You will sign it. You'll present it to us. We will also walk that mile. Hopefully we could do it at the same time. And then that way we can start closing the project out. All right, as I say, the DLA does his review as well on that 17C. All right. All right, now the report of expenditures, and you're going to collect a bunch of other information, and we have a checklist for you to work with, okay, to make it easier for you. You've got to do it within 6 months of project completion, and we're doing a very bad job of that right now. The percentage is not as high as we would like to see. As I said, it's got to be signed by a person in responsible charge. It can't be the janitor, okay? Let's look at the public works director, city manager, someone at that level. All right. All of these forms I'm going to give you links to at the very end. And so all of these forms are what's necessary. And it really does give a complete picture at that point of final. All right. This is just the cover letter from the 17A. Just gives you just some basic information of that and who it's going to. And we'll sign it. I'll sign it in my office. I'm not the DLAE, but I've been given that, delegated that authority to go ahead and accept this and process it. All right, this is page 2 of that very same 17A, and we're talking about chronology. We want to know when you accepted the project, if you have any rain days, something like that, any kind of stoppage, you're going to do that. Okay, the next one, this is the checklist, okay? These are, you're either going to use these attachments or not. The vast majority of them are required. If you're going to have consultants that are on-call contracts, you're going to want that 17F1 versus the 17F. You're always going to need a 17F, whether you have a 0 goal or a 20% goal or more on disadvantaged business enterprise subcontractors. The 17F is for all first tier subcontractors. Please remember that, okay? Material certification, report of completion of structures. This is an optional form, the 17J or the 17I, and there is a difference between those, whether it's built on system or off system, like a bridge. You'll need those as-built, okay? But on a regular road rehab project or a safe routes to school project, you're probably not building a structure, and those forms are not necessary. Report of completion of right-of-way. If you're purchasing right-of-way or charging any right-of-way expenses, we want that 17K as well, okay? The final inspection form, I showed you the 17C. Final detail estimate. That detail estimate is really necessary, that it has to merge, or it has to be equivalent to that final invoice. The final detail estimate shows everything you did during construction. It's also going to include your construction engineering. It will not include, I can't think of the term, I'm very sorry. Let me continue on. Okay, the final invoice package. Okay, we're going to use chapter 5. It's a 5A, the typical form that you would use for your progress payments. Okay, this is a risk-based invoicing, but we do want to have some of the cost summaries as well. All right, here we go. This is what the regular invoice, if you've been doing progress invoices, it's just the same. What you would have to do is up in the top right-hand corner, you would tick the box for a final invoice. You want to make sure that you've ticked your federal or state funds, or even both, depending on how your project has been funded, so that way you get the right phases in there. And then you'll have to know when the phases were actually authorized or allocated, and the from and to dates. When was the start date to the end date? That end date should match through other documents that you have in here, so they all agree with each other. All right, at the very last page of this invoice, you're going to have all of these forms that you're going to have. These are all live links. So that way you make sure that you've got the correct forms, the most latest form that you can link to, and then start filling it out to complete that final package. Change order summary. This is a very special form. I want to show you the change order summary. See, so if you have a difference between the time of award to the time of final invoice, this is where you document all of those change orders. All of your change orders should have happened. And when those are documented on a separate form, we don't need to see those. But during an audit, they're going to want to see when it was the change order approved. And it had to be approved before the work was done. Okay, not after. Okay, and there's one item that I really want you to pay attention to on this is a liquidated damages or contractor claim. We want to make sure that that says none. If you had some, that's fine. And some of those could possibly be eligible for repayment or reimbursement. But you need to put something there that whether it's been liquidated damages or contractor's claim, that's a big item that we want to look at. Date of completion and date of acceptance. You've already done that on the 17C, but I would go ahead and put that information there as well. It may be necessary to refer to it. Okay. Now we're going into the structures or as-built, okay? And I'm just going to touch on them briefly. The 17I and the 17J, depending on the type of structure it was, or not really the structure, but where it was built, whether it was built on system over a state highway, or whether it was a local bridge or a local structure of some sort, okay? The two reports are very different from each other. There's a lot more needed for the ones when it's over a state system. All right, here we go. This is the one for structures. This would be the one where FHWA is involved, and there's a different box that you have to send it to, or will send it to when it gets there eventually. Local streets and roads, the J, it's a much simpler form, but we do need those as-bills. All right, the 17K, as I said, if you're doing any right-of-way acquisition, right-of-way engineering, right-of-way support, we want to have that 17K so that way you can show us those actual costs. The actual, you're also going to have to document the parcel numbers and how they were taken, or whether it was a partial take or a full take, that sort of thing. All of that information will be requested on the 17K at that time. 17L, that's a unique form, force accounts. A lot of local agencies will exercise the use of force account where they can, and it's legitimate. You have to ask for it first. Quite often you'll have to do another form, and we'll have to deal with that on another day, because the authorization to actually do force account is in an earlier phase. It's not at final. All right, for the state-funded projects now, we're using a 17M. And if you have state and federal funds on a project, you're going to have to throw this 17M in there as well, specifically documenting the funds, the state funds that were used on that project, okay? And let me grab it for you. Here's the 17M. And with that, you can see the individual typical information that's necessary. If this was a state-funded project, this would take the place of that 17C. I'm certifying that you built what you said you were going to build. And someone in responsible charge is going to sign this document as well. If there were only state funds on it, there would only be the 17M and the final invoice and the detail estimate. That's all you would need. Whereas if it was federal funds, you're going to need all the other listed forms. And if you threw in some state STIP or some ATP money, you would need this form as well, just to talk about the specific state fund that you were using. If there are any state funds that were allocated but not used, there's a possibility that those funds could be transferred to another project, possibly. If those funds could be reprogrammed in the same year that it was used, or possibly a future year. This is where you really have to keep this information together and push it forward to like your MPO or RTPA, telling them that, hey, I saved some money. I got 100,000 left on this project. Where can we dump this money? Because it would possibly be funds that were controlled by your RTPA or MPO. And it's always good to stay in communication and contact with them. All right, now I'm talking about Chapter 20, deficiencies and sanctions. And I'm really wrapping up here, folks, okay? So if your final detail estimate and your final invoice don't match, your payment's going to be delayed. That could be a month. It could be as long as it takes for you to put those two calculated total together. It's got to be done right. Excuse me. And when you're done, all of these forms have to be kept for a minimum of 3 years after the date of the final voucher, or actually as well when the final invoice has been paid. And keep all records of that project, invoices, emails, anything that would be relevant to your position of what you did at the project during an audit. It's always to make yourself bulletproof for an audit. Please keep all of your records. And with that, I'm done. These are links to all of the forms, and also the 3 chapters: invoicing, Chapter 5, project completion, Chapter 17. and audits and corrective actions or deficiencies and sanctions, Chapter 20. And with that, I'm done.
Jim, well done, my man. Before we go on break, I got a couple questions in the chat. We can field them really quickly. I think one of them is easy, and another one you might be able to make ready work of as well. Is project closeout, again, I'm assuming that Lisa's question means for you, for project closeout and final invoice, is this project completion for just construction or other project phases?
This is everything. When you're coming in for project completion, you are done with PE, you're done with environmental, unless the only oddball thing about environmental is if you're a bridge and you have mitigation costs that are going to roll into 2 and 3 more years, what you'll do is you will close this project out, you will open a new project with those mitigation funds that were assessed for this project, and that will continue on in the future as another project number, but this project number closes out. And one thing I didn't get to talk about, and I want to bring Gerald Lee back into the picture. Okay, Gerald, a shout out to Marsu. If Marsu works in your office, don't let her retire. She does great work with the doing the indirect cost rates. Okay. And the thing is, I want the local agencies to know when you get your letter with your approved indirect cost rate from Marsu, you're going to look at it. There's about 5 or 6 paragraphs, but there's a sentence in between those paragraphs all by itself. And that sentence says that this rate that we've just approved is good for both federal and state funded projects. That was a question earlier. And I'm glad that Gerald's office handles that beautifully.
One other quick,
yes, sir.
As usual, we will answer all of the questions in writing, answered orally or put into the Q&A in the transcripts. We'll just see if we can get 1 or 2 more before we go on break. Jim, did you say that the as-builts need to be provided for the final closeout?
Yes, we need the as-builts to be able to send those off. They should be part of the final package. And so during that 6 months from when it's complete, they should be doing those as-builts. They may possibly be just about done with them at the point of completion. And so an engineer would have to tell me I'm wrong, and I could very well be wrong. But yes, we need those as-builts as along with the final closeout package. We really do. If it's for us at local assistance, if it's a local bridge, it's got to go to our local bridge section. If it's something that's on system, we've got to give that to Caltrans, Caltrans meaning the capital side, because now it's a structure over one of their facilities.
Okay, very good. Let's see if we can get 1 more in there. We'll just go to break. Again, lots of great questions in here. And as usual, we're trying to fit in as much content as we are. We're crimped for time. So if project includes, you mentioned this just a minute ago, I want to do a little bit deeper on this one. Jenny asked if the project includes plant establishment work that spans or other environmental mitigations. Let's make it even a broader question. That spans for 3 years after construction, can we close out the project and establish another FPN for plant establishment or other environmental work?
Yes, and we did cover that in that one of the first questions is, yeah, if you have a mitigation or a plant establishment, close this project out and then open the next one, because you were given funds or you were programmed funds for that mitigation. And so those funds are still available. You commit to them in a new authorization or a new allocation for that span of period of time. And that is the answer is yes, close out and reopen a new mitigation or a new plant establishment.
All right, last one, I promise, Jim. Can you close out the federal or state funds on a project even if the contract isn't being closed out, i.e. contract is moving forward, will no longer use such federal or state funds?
That's a tough question because I would say no. I would say no. You have to wait until the project is complete because they have to accept it. And the thing is, if you're no longer using federal funds on portion A through C, what's to say that the contractor comes back and has to obliterate what they just built with federal or state funds and do something else because there was a change order, there was a change in situation, a change of the scope, or when you find that the earth was incorrect, that you had an incorrect base. and you had to replace that base that you already paved over. So we would rather wait until it was a final for the project, that you accepted it. Everything that's there is going to stay there.
Very good. Jim's going to put his contact information in the chat. You have his presentation in your packet. And many of these kinds of questions, frankly, are really well answered by contacting your district DLAE. Hopefully you have them on speed dial. Hopefully you know who they are and have a relationship with them. If you don't, find out who they are. Take a look at our homepage where you can find out who your district local assistance area engineer is. And you can ask them these kinds of in detail project specific questions. And we will get answers to you guys in follow up via the transcripts, which you will all receive. We're going to go on break now. And then when we come back for the final segment of our program, Jose Luis is going to provide a best practice presentation from SACOG on the local project delivery assistance that they provide their entire region. So that you might be able to model your own local project delivery activities off of that example, develop better relationships with your RTPA or MPO, and so forth. We will be right back. Sheriff, if you could put on a 10-minute timer, we will resume it after we are able to take a brief break. Thank you. All right, now this is a really exciting part of our program. A big part of the original vision that we had was that this would be a little bit more than an information dump, which it is. A lot of information here. Our folks have gone through great lengths to summarize vast amounts of information that are available in series of trainings, all-day trainings, federal aid series. Is a full 5 days worth of in-depth knowledge transfer and technical capacity building, on-demand videos, you name it. So a big job for our presenters to summarize and synthesize that much information in what's basically just a couple hours. And what we wanted to do is to add on to that a local voice, a regional voice in this case today. To make sure that this is not a one-way conversation, that we are helping you all facilitate best practices between each other. And Jose Luis with SACOG took us up on our offer, our request, frankly, to join us and share what one of the state's big MPOs is doing to help its members deliver their projects in a timely fashion. So we're going to turn it over now to our first ever peer exchange best practice presenter. Jose Luis, take it away.
Yes, hi, thank you. Hey everyone, I'm going to launch this presentation and then we're going to do some quick polling questions. So let's see if I'm doing this right. So my goal, my job is to share a best practice, the first of the best practices. And my best practice is simple, it's regular coordination. But at the regional level. So what am I talking about? Let's just jump into story time. No, yeah, story time. Wait, no, I was gonna do survey first, excuse me. Back out of survey. Let's launch our poll. While I find it, I guess I have to stop sharing. Sorry, everyone.
I can launch it.
Oh, that'd be great, thank you.
Hopefully this is the correct one.
It is, I'll read it. Do you already have regular project delivery coordination between local assistance, sponsors, and the regional agency? So if you're a city, a county, a local assistance or regional agency, you should be able to answer this question. Do you already have regular project delivery coordination between your group? I'm going to give this 5 more seconds.
And if you're one of the new folks out there, this is a great opportunity. Maybe you don't know. This is a great opportunity for you to knock on some doors, make some phone calls, and develop those kinds of relationships that Jose Luis is going to share.
All right. Well, so the good news is a whopping 2/3 already have regular project delivery coordination between regions. And when I go and hang out with my other RTPA buddies, and we talk about this, Yeah, there's generally coordination happening. But maybe not SACOG's best practice of coordination. And to say maybe I don't know, maybe suggests that you haven't been invited yet. Can we do the next one? Can we launch the next poll question?
Okay, here you go.
Great. All right. Does your local public works staff wish they had more ongoing programming project delivery training? Like, are you getting complaints? Are you hearing complaints? Are you making complaints saying you guys don't understand advanced construction? What is it with this project end dates? Why is that such a big deal? How do we turn in an RFA? We got the training a while ago, but these RFA submittals are tricky to figure out. Are you getting or hearing complaints about navigating CTC timely use of fund pitfalls? You're here at a training, so you probably are someone who's thirsty for training. Let's close the poll. So what we're hearing is about two thirds also wish they had more ongoing programming project delivery training, advanced construction, etc. 11% are like, I'm done, I'm good. I either know it all or stop pushing this on me. Let's do the third question, please. All right, this other one's pretty similar. It's, are you familiar with the local project delivery support services that your regional transportation planning agency or your metropolitan planning organization provides? I work for an MPO / RTPA, and we provide services, but sometimes there's not a lot of awareness of the services that we provide. Are you familiar? Okay, a lot of folks not necessarily familiar with the services that their region provides. All right. So I will note, I can see it, you guys can't see it, sorry. So yeah, about 25% said yes, 60% said no, 17% said maybe. It's really hard to know for sure if you are familiar with it, right? Okay, so that kind of gets me into my presentation, which is still here. So that's survey time. So some observations are, it sounds like people are getting to, figuring out how to advance my slide. Great. It sounds like people are getting some amount of coordination from their regions, but maybe that coordination doesn't look the way SACOG does it. Some things that, and that's what jumped out from our survey. So I'm going to jump into my story. When I first started SACOG 20 years ago, we were at risk of losing $19 million in federal funds. 19 million still sounds like a lot to me now, but in 2020, oh my God, that was a lot back then. And that was unacceptable. We were not going to lose $19 million in federal transportation funds as a regional planning agency. So we got together. Well, I mean, we did what anyone would do. Where's the problem? And we dug in, and it looked like our two big jurisdictions, I'm going to call them out, City of Sacramento and County of Sacramento, they weren't getting their authorizations turned into local assistance. So I was just a child back then at SACOG, but we called them into a room, and we also called in local assistance. And we asked the city and county, hey, what's going on? How come you're not getting these things authorized? And if you work for local assistance, you can probably guess what they said. They said, it's not our fault. We turned in our paperwork. Local assistance hasn't processed it. And then local assistance got pretty angry back then. And they said, it's not our fault. They're not turning it in completely. They're missing fields. They're putting in incorrect information. They don't know how to fill out a request for authorization. They need better training. And they would argue, we've done all the training. This is really difficult stuff. So what launched were a series of meetings focused on solutions. How do we get these projects delivered? Filling out the forms together in the room. It was very clear to SACOG staff these forms were not actually that simple to fill out. It's a difficult job that cities have to do. And this was back in the 2020s when people were still faxing in forms. So that meeting continued. It never stopped. Eventually it switched to a once a month meeting. SACOG, which is the MPO, Caltrans local assistance, providing support, the city and county public works staff. They eventually had coordinators that coordinate with their engineers. And that meeting continues to this day. In fact, we've got another one. In fact, it was supposed to happen today, but I had this training, so we had to push it back. We call it the city county meeting. It's also called the project delivery coordination group meeting. And what I want to share is that meeting became our best practice. When we look back at the years we've been doing it, it turns out that that meeting was ongoing training for the city of Sacramento and county of Sacramento. Anytime local assistants had something that they needed public works to learn, they would just kind of share it there at the meeting in a really kind of low stress, high level of service engagement. They could fill out paperwork together there in the room. So it became ongoing training. Whenever the city or county would have new staff, they'd bring them to the meeting and have them start attending so they would pick this up. SACOG, we would change our rules periodically. There'd be new CTC rules, new funding would show up. All of these things would get captured. So that brings me to my next slide. These are the benefits we got from this. Better delivery, ongoing training. Like, you can go to these local assistance trainings, but just imagine every month you're meeting with local assistants and you're hearing about the latest thing. Information sharing, this became a safe space to ask questions, like dumb questions about what does this acronym mean, or how does advanced construction work? And what's neat is everyone in the room would learn from each other. SACOG, we'd have new staff, we'd have to learn some of these things. Local assistants would frequently bring in new engineers who didn't know their own rules, and they would learn it. In fact, local assistants would oftentimes bring a senior like Jim Day and a new hire. So yeah, we answered random questions. Another thing that happened is sometimes we would bring our problems to this meeting, and sometimes I wouldn't know the solution, or local assistants wouldn't know the solution. It'd be the other local jurisdiction. They would say, oh yeah, we have a process for that. And there would be pooled troubleshooting where everyone would share their own approach to solving problems. This ended up becoming like kind of a workshop, an ongoing workshop for delivering projects. And some of the best ideas came out of these meetings. So the RFA, the E76 form that people fill out, that thing has improved at least 3 times over the last 2 decades. And I don't know, I didn't get permission from local assistants to say this, but I believe District 3 local assistants, my district, was key in each of those iterations of improvements, because we would either come up with the ideas here, or we would test them out in this environment. I'm really proud of a lot of the great things that have come from this meeting. But the biggest thing that came from it, the biggest improvement, was trust. You see, back when we first started, when I was talking about all the finger pointing, it was an antagonistic relationship between our local assistants, our 2 big agencies, and SACOG with finger pointing. We needed to move past that. You guys probably know this, but in filling out this paperwork, it's easy to make mistakes, to get things wrong. In reviewing the paperwork, it's easy to get mistakes, to start blaming. And what we needed is to move past blaming to all of us being on the same team, a place where you could build trust. And that trust that we've built in the city county meeting, the project delivery coordination group, has really come in handy. When the chips are down, our relationships are what shines. But you don't have to just take my word for it. Jim Day, who just presented, I asked him his thoughts on these meetings. Jim's heading towards retirement, and I asked him, so what do you think, man? Are these good meetings? And he said, these meetings encourage financial dialogue. Like, I don't know if you have a sort of meeting at your jurisdiction or your region where you guys can just talk shop. You can just talk money. You can ask about eligibilities. You can get deep into it. I also asked the city of Sacramento, his name is Jesse Gothan, and his staff is actually attending this training today. I asked him what he thought about these meetings, and he said, all projects have challenges and occasionally get stuck. It just happens. These meetings are good for problem solving and discovering a solution to keep the project moving forward. And that is my best practice. So we'll transition into the nitty-gritty details. These are my tips. First, don't just have a meeting. Have a great meeting. Have a kick butt meeting. And this is how you're going to do it. Keep it small. If you have a 20-person meeting, you're having the wrong kind of meeting. You can't talk about project delivery failure in a giant room full of people. It needs to be a small room of people who trust each other when they talk about all the different ways the project screwed up and how they're going to fix it. I have one of these meetings for every one of my 6 counties. I do not do one giant 6 county project delivery TAC meeting. I would say keep them regular, even if you don't think you have anything coming up on the agenda. It's amazing. There's always something to talk about in terms of projects, changing rules, or an opportunity to build relationships. But test out different schedules. You don't want to do these too often. I start with monthly, and then I see how we go from there. I would also add in person is best. This has been my talking point since before COVID. And now in COVID, it's like almost heresy to say, hey, you guys should meet in person. That's a really good way to build trust and relationships. So instead of just requiring people come in person, think creatively about how to get people to want to come in person. Let's get some coffee. Let's get some good bagels. Time your meeting so that you guys can do a field trip immediately after it. Go look at some cool projects. I'm guessing for your region, it's been a long time since you've done some good field trips. Yeah, transition to something fun afterwards. Do one of these meetings in the late afternoon, and then I'll break early and go get some happy hour. But it's that in person that's really going to make it help. Finally, I put this agenda here, not to bore you to death, but the beginning of every agenda, we repeat in a boring way the meeting objective. The whole point of this meeting, we say, is to know the estimated RFA and allocation dates for upcoming projects, to stay current on issues related to funding and project delivery, share and learn information and lessons learned. I start sounding like Star Trek, Will Shatner, and to continue to build relationships between sponsors, local assistants, and SACOG. The overall purpose is to support the timely delivery of projects and funding programs. And then I stop here and I say, look, anything on this agenda that doesn't do this, we're going to get rid of it. Anything that's missing, we will add it. We will make this meeting kick butt. We're not here to mess around. We're going to get some projects delivered. After I go through that key point of our meeting, one of the first things I do is I assign someone to keep track of time and someone to evaluate the meeting. I'm going to repeat that again. We have a meeting evaluator. At the end of every meeting, one person who volunteered or is designated will evaluate whether our meeting kicked butt or didn't. And they will tell us what we need to fix. My goal is that these meetings there should never be a complaint outside of these meetings about these meetings. We should deal with any complaints right here and now. Let's fix it. And so as a result, people only compliment my bosses about these meetings. Finally, I would say you got to add an icebreaker. You got to get to know each other. You got to find out, what people did over the weekend, what people's summer plans are. This is how you build relationships. This is how you build trust. Now let's look at the agenda. The first thing after we agree on the objective and we assign rules is we hand it to Jim Bay. We hand it to local assistants. Local assistants goes through their talking points, inactive projects, project expiring end dates. Do we have your DBADA QAP forms turned in? Any new rules, any change in staff, anything that local assistants could possibly talk about, rules that people aren't following that maybe they need a brush up on. It's a chance to question local assistants. Then once they're done, we go over the delivery plan. If you guys don't have a delivery plan, you should. Every MPO is responsible for turning in to Caltrans. It used to be by April 1st, somewhere around April or May. Their delivery plan, their plan for how they're going to obligate RSTP, CMAQ, Highway Bridge Program, Highway Safety Improvement Program funds. And to get that delivery plan, I don't know, maybe they send you guys a spreadsheet. We don't do that. We ask them right there in the room. We go over their projects. We say, hey, who's going to deliver? And it's amazing how much back and forth there is on the question. They're like, well, we could, but we don't know. Or sometimes they think their HSIP funds aren't available for 3 years. And we tell them, no, your funds are available now. Come get them now. So I would say if your region is developing an obligation plan through an Excel like email, it's not as good as just asking in person, talking to them face to face, warning them the dangers of waiting and telling them about opportunities to advance their projects. We're always talking about the current delivery plan and then the next delivery plan. Finally, we talk about other matters. I just want to point out, this is not the same as a TAC. If you have a TAC, great, but this is not that. We don't talk about anything else except for how we're going to deliver on projects on time. That's it. And we're in and we're out and we're done. There are no transportation planners that come to this meeting. It's all public works, engineering type folks, analysts, people who are focused on delivery. And here's like a shot of one of our last field trips. I know each of these people so well. One of them you might recognize, Ross Foon. He's working in headquarters now. These are great people, and we've developed trust through these meetings. In fact, maybe now would be a good time to pause. No, I'll keep going. Finally, I would just say this is an opportunity to bust out really great tools. So most regions have a spreadsheet of their delivery plan. We have that, but we also, in our proprietary software where we keep track of our federal transportation projects, we have a module to ask about people's delivery schedule. So on this project, you can see it's got a mixture of STIP RIP, which is STIP funds, and some CMAQ funds. And the question is, when are they going to submit to authorize these CMAQ and STIP funds? They told us August 1st, 2022. And then we keep track of the notes. Looks like Davis is going to need a variance. There's an extension approved, that sort of stuff. All right. Now, I shared my best practice. It's kind of turned to you. What's holding you back? And before I do that, I want to share, this is why I know it's our best practice. Because early on, when I was a young analyst, people from other cities and counties in our region, they started complaining. They started saying, hey, how come only the city and county of Sacramento have this meeting? Why don't you do one of these for the rest of us? And my bosses at the time said, you know, this is just, that would just be too much work. We can't do this. Why don't you guys just come to our TAC meeting, this catch-all where we talk about everything sort of meeting. You can talk about your projects there. And so we sent all the other 5 counties and the other 20 cities to there. And it was not good enough. So about 5 years ago, when I found myself in charge of program project delivery, I said, we got to do something about these complaints. The same complaints you guys are talking about. Not enough training, ongoing training, not enough relationship. I don't know how to fill out these forms. They're coming back to me, return to sender. The local assistance isn't being responsive enough. These agencies aren't responding to me enough. We got rid of all of those complaints when we blew up the city county meeting. So we have the city county meeting. We have a meeting for all the other cities in Sacramento. We have a meeting for all the agencies in Yolo, all the agencies in Yuba and Sutter, all the agencies in Placer, and then El Dorado County. I just take care of the phone call. But anyways, the point is we've implemented this as a best practice. Every one of our jurisdictions gets FaceTime with local assistance, SACOG, and we go over their projects. So transitioning now, Neil, to what's holding you back. I'm curious, are agencies wanting to start something like this in their region? Do we have any Q&As to talk about, Neil?
We've got one that's going to be a discussion. Most of the questions in the Q&A, most of the questions in the Q&A box still remaining are regarding auditing and closeout. So hopefully those folks will continue to field those questions. We have one remaining regarding safety plan, which hopefully somebody will get to. So no, for yours so far, no questions.
Well, I have some questions that I was going to test out, but I didn't see them in the poll. I wonder if they're there.
No, they cannot type, right?
All right, so I've got some questions that I'll just throw out and see if anyone responds back in the chat. Let me go find them.
As you do, Jose, let me share this one because it's a good one actually, and it's really kind of help probe where our locals are at. So RTC asks. Let me see if I can get the whole thing in here. I do have it. Oh wait, hold on. Let me get to the. Okay. Do most cities, counties, other project sponsors just have a few people, like 1 or 2 staff? Or everyone, all project managers trying to get a handle on the LAPM, CTC, and other processes needed to make sure and not miss deadlines or lose funds. So this is basically a capacity kind of a question here.
Let me, would you mind repeating it one more time for me, please?
Absolutely. Do most cities, counties, or other project sponsors have just a few staff? Or is everyone, are all project managers trying to get a handle on the LAPM, CTC, and other processes.
So I can speak to it in my region. A best practice, and man, I thought they did this all across California. I don't know. Usually there's one person that interfaces with their Caltrans local assistants, and one person that interfaces with the MPO with regards to delivering projects. So there's just one person that has to turn in those requests for authorization, those E76s, one person that fills out the application. But the bigger jurisdictions will have multiple people trained, because if that one person's gone, you lose a lot of knowledge. And then sometimes it's too much work for one person to do. So I will usually have one point of contact, and then at the individual jurisdiction, there might just be one or more than one person that can fill out the paperwork and turn it into local assistance. And I would add, sometimes that person is also the same person who applies for competitive federal dollars. Sometimes it's not. Oftentimes I'll see planners, not the public works staff, and it's their job to apply for federal funds. So you got planners applying, and you got the public works going and getting paid.
For that question, I believe the commenter is looking for an audience poll, actually, Jose Luis. I can share while we allow people a moment to unmute them or to raise their hand so we can unmute you. Share what it looks like in your seat. I can share what life looked like when I was an external, when I was an RTPA planning and delivery program manager. I worked for many, many years in a small rural region just outside of Sacramento, the Amador County Transportation Commission. And we had 5 cities in a county, and almost universally my cities were teeny. The mayor and the city manager and the police chief and the front desk clerk were performing a lot of these functions. So everybody was constantly scrambling with trying to figure out this process. And so there's a lot of reliance on the RTPA. We were a small rural one, so we weren't a big MPO player like Jose Luis. But that relationship between the locals and the region and the assistance that we provided was absolutely crucial for their success, because we had this thing called, which everybody has, is called the overall work program, right? That has individual work elements. And that's where your regional transportation planning agency can program funds specifically to help you deliver your local projects. We had an on-call engineer that did cost estimates and designs and grant applications and so forth and so on. We had a position specifically dedicated to doing just the kind of function that Jose Luis is describing here. So definitely best practice here is to make sure that you encourage those relationships, utilize those resources, and if you're a region or an MPO, provide them. Stage that kind of assistance and program that through your OWP so you have resources to provide.
Well, Neil, we're heading towards
Jose Luis. Well, I'm gonna see if we have anybody else. Go for it.
We're heading towards lunch. I'm going to say some of my just like final pitch stuff to everybody. So I'm a region. I'm not a city or county, and I understand most people here are cities and counties. Asking your region for this or finding out what your region has to offer is probably the pitch here. You can tell them, hey, Jose Luis does this up in Sacramento. We'd like to get something like what he does. Here's what your region's going to have to do. They're going to have to use their PPM funding, programming project monitoring funds they get from the CTC. If they already use that, they can go and levy other funds. They can use regional service transportation program funds to help pay for the kind of coordination that we do. And then if they're too small, they might not even have the money to do much more than that. They would need to come up with a process and a policy that they would take to their board, and they would need to add this sort of work to their overall work program. But this sort of coordination probably already exists in their overall work program. And what I'm talking about has a low cost. It's a meeting. It's once a month. If you're a bigger jurisdiction, it might be once every 2 or 3 months. Your other kind of role is you just get local assistants to come. At first, I wasn't sure if my local assistants would want to come to multiple 2-hour meetings, and they're actually thrilled. They take care of more than one phone call that would have come in by having this meeting, and they get a much more educated set of sponsors. I would just remind everybody, remember the details do matter. This is not just any meeting. This is a meeting that you get evaluated right there on the spot. This is a meeting that people want to come to, not one that they find as boring. This is a meeting where you got to keep it small. 5 people is fine. You want a meeting where people can share their secrets and air their dirty laundry without fear of reprisal or it being widely known. The reason projects fail to deliver is legion. And usually it's someone messed up. Someone messed up. They could have done a better job. And the goal is to learn from those mistakes. Focus on solutions and focus on relationships, and you guys will be in a great place. And if you already do this, congratulations. I know it's a best practice, and it sounds like you're doing it too if you're already doing this. That's my final kind of talking point. Neil, maybe you got some more questions. Otherwise, I'm happy to transition to the next.
Well, that's great. We still have about, say, 9 minutes or 8 minutes. Old friend Tamara Layton up there in Del Norte County shares something here in the chat. Del Norte, by which she means Del Norte LTC, I'm pretty sure. Raise your hand if you'd like to share anything else there, Tamara. Is Del Norte LTC, the local transportation commission, is a one-person shop. Okay, her partner agencies, as in the county of Del Norte, the city of Crescent City, carry the bulk of responsibility for project delivery. She helps when she can, and when's needed, is what she's sharing. And I'll just go ahead and say, I think that's actually pretty reflective of just how all over the map it is. The best practice that I shared with you a minute ago, we had this great individual named Charles Field, who's long since retired, but he had this vision of using these PPM or RSTP funds that Jose Luis alluded to a minute ago. These are funds that go directly to the region, right? They can be converted into capital funds, but his vision was that these funds are so much more valuable to provide that delivery assistance, because if we can deliver our projects on time, we can use them to help leverage and match and write grants and so forth and so on. We will capture more funds into the region. And so through the OWP, he had that work element. And through that work element, he basically had an on-call environmental consultant that did your PES or your preliminary environmental study along the way. A grant writer that wrote your grants for you. Again, the engineers that did your preliminary designs, your cost estimates, and a lot of the architectural renderings or the exhibits that you need for your grant application or for your preliminary project scoping. All of that work is planning, right? That comes in advance of actual project delivery, helps you get your federal funding, and then provides maybe even oversight. You have an A&E consultant contract and provide project management assistance, so that your limited public works staff is not pulling their hair out every day because they've got a specialist to help them with that delivery function. Jose Luis, take it away. Keep going here, and I'll see what else we got here in the chat.
I think it was the last slide of my presentation. I didn't show it, but I wonder if I left it as a comment that would work. I'm happy to take an offline email. So I'm going to put my email in, jcassidis@sacog.org. I help out other regions. I'm happy to help out you if you have a question you want to ask me later offline. I'm talking to you attendees. But like I said, Neil, I think we're good. What Tamara pointed out is, rural transportation rural transportation. I always think of the Rural Counties Task Force. Rural counties have a challenge, but they also have maybe just a handful of projects obligating each year. So they can provide actually sometimes even higher level of service because they have fewer projects to focus on. At SACOG, we've got dozens coming through, and these meetings help us kind of keep track of them.
That's very good. One more question in the chat here in regards to the local agency district relationship, let's just call it. Okay. So the overt question is, how would we request training or update from updates? I think it means from your local assistance representation. Let's go back to the key best practice that Jose Luis just shared. It's
So
relationships.
that last speaker, Jim Day, he comes to all my meetings. Like I don't have to send my staff to some once a year sort of training where they kind of hear kind of a rote presentation. They can ask the question right now about their project right now, and they don't have to even get on the phone to call Jim. They can just wait till the first Tuesday of the month when they know the meeting's coming up. And when they ask their question, everyone in the room benefits from hearing the question and hearing the answer. That's how we essentially do ongoing training. Now, key to this is having a local assistance that's able to answer those questions. But local assistants will never tell you, I don't know, sorry. You ask them a difficult question, they will go and find the answer, and then they will come back and share it. And then you'll have your information sharing in your ongoing training.
And let's be honest, the last couple of years in a virtual environment has been a challenge for us all. And let's be also honest, we all have got to own our various aspects of our relationships, right? I mean, communication is a two-way street, and we're not always good at communication on either side of the aisle. So you got to pick up the phone. You got to have your DLAE on speed dial. You got to be able to know what these venues are, like the Rural County Task Force or the CalRTPA group or the Transportation Cooperative Committee, because these are all venues through which you can get great information like this. You can ask questions. All of the contact information, the links that we put into the chat are invaluable resources to elevate non-responsiveness. If you feel like you have an issue with your local assistance group, you know who to talk to. Not just at headquarters, but even at your district in terms of your district local assistance or planning and local assistance deputy. If you feel like your communication challenges are so important, they really need to be elevated to the executive level, we're here for you.
Oh, I would even just interrupt and say your RTPA and your MPO is also there for you. So remember that first meeting I talked about where we got everyone in the room? That's one of the things regions do, is we're good at facilitating collaboration. And sometimes there's a communication breakdown, and your RTPA MPO partner, like Tamara, might speak the language that is not being translated well. So this actually happens a lot. I'm talking to a local assistance engineer and they're asking for something, and then I'm hearing the city or county asking for something, and they're talking past each other because they each have their own jargon and acronyms and understanding of things. And over the years of me going to these meetings, I've come to understand the concepts and the terms. I have not taken extensive local assistance training. My training has been from these meetings where I learn from local assistance and from the agencies.
So we're going to go ahead and move into wrap up. The question that I asked you at the very beginning of the day was, as we look at continuing to refine this venue, as we look at additional or other platforms that we might be able to use, other formats that and thank you for the shout out for District 8, they appreciate the kudos. We want to look at ways that we can improve this forum, and we can deliver trainings or information and best practices on topics that directly matter to you. So now what I'd like to do is ask all of you, now that you've sat through our program and you've thought about different challenges, areas, to go ahead and take a minute to type into the chat what you would like to get next time. We'll also take any suggestions that you have in terms of improvement, whether that's the technical platform Zoom, whether that is our approach to this venue. This is only the third time that we've done this, and we're still learning and improving as we go. So I'm going to ask the question, and then I'm going to say go, and everybody throw it in the chat. Here's the question. What topics would you like us to cover next time? And how can we improve this venue so it's more high impact for you? Go. And while you do that, I want to explain or share with you just how vital your input for us is. We couldn't do this without you. We wouldn't really even know what to put on the docket. We've had 469 people log in this morning, and that's a pretty big group. So if you have any suggestions on how we could improve this, that's what we would like to hear. In the chat is the training evaluation link provided by Sac State, so that you can provide that in an anonymous kind of fashion. And we're here for you. So Christopher says 10C requirements. That's great. Give us more. We are here for another 5 minutes, as it were, and greatly appreciate any technical topics. Maybe it's relationship building, maybe it's communication, as a speaker just now indicated, and some of the challenges regarding relationship building. Those are the kind of things that we would like to hear. As you think about that, drop your suggestions in the chat. I want to let you know that you can expect more surveys like the question I just asked you coming forthwith. As a quarterly venue, our next one is going to be on September 8th. So please do sign up for the blog and the announcement listserv that Sherry Graham mentioned at the very beginning of our program. So you can see all of the great opportunities that we are trying to advertise to you, so we can help you be successful in delivering your local state and federally funded projects. Tracy, I don't have anything else. That wraps our program, and we can keep this room open for the next couple minutes. And you're welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And again, please keep putting your ideas into the chat. Sherry, is there any other housekeeping or closure that that we need to provide as people put their ideas in the chat and depart for the day? Tracy?
Yes. I have nothing else, if that's what you're asking.
That's what I was asking. Did I miss anything? We've got the link to the evaluation survey in the chat. Still got another 280 some folks that are logging off.
Yeah, and we'll be posting a recording with all the resource materials. We'll try to capture all those questions that didn't get answered live today. So you'll have those as a resource as well.
And for all of our instructors, if you'll just hang back for just 2 minutes, we'll just do a very quick debrief for initial impressions, and I'll be scheduling a larger group debrief so we can continue to refine this venue moving forward. Thank you for joining us, everyone. We greatly appreciate your participation.
This is Jim Day. I'm still answering questions on the Q&A.
That's great, man. Thank you so much. As all of the rest, we got 100 plus people still left here. We will boot them here shortly. Do just a quick, observation round robin here, and then Hyan will be circulating the Q&A transcript and chat log in the form of the transcript with the links as attachment or appendices, as it were. And so, Jim, if there's anything that you don't get to by the time we close, don't worry about it. She'll send that around, and you'll be able to get to it. What we will try to do is make sure that even if the transcript says answered live, we'll still want to provide an answer to those questions in writing, again, to make sure it's a full transcript.
But we'll also take a look at the questions and make sure that we weed out any duplicates or questions that may have been answered, elsewhere.
Oh, that's a good note, Kelly, because there's the dismissed column, and there were a couple comments in there, and we might need to elevate a couple of comments to D, because while they're not questions for us to respond to per se, always good to have a finger on the pulse of our customers. And you can pull that log as well, right, Tracy? The dismissed tab.
I don't see why not, right? I think it was just the one. I don't know where Thomas Conti is from, but that would That's really the only one, right, that was dismissed that had.
The only substantive one was, a complaint about the process, which is legit, but nothing that we can respond to per se.
Yeah, and I just put it back. I moved it from dismissed. So
Okay,
83 questions answered live, right, was really great. Some of them did get, some of them did say answered live, but I'm not sure that happened, right?
Well, hey, before we move forward, Tracy, would you mind dismissing our remaining audience and then
Neil,
we'll
I
just do a quick.
tried, right?
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. There are many. You're a co-host, I believe now, and you can help if you'd like to.
Okay. Yeah. How do I do that? Let me
You just highlight, right?
But thank you to everybody that's still hanging on there. Just one last thank you.
Right.
We had over 400 people for the majority of the presentation. So
yeah, we kept 385 up to 1145. So that's relatively strong showing late in the show. And thank you, Jose Luis, for batting cleanup there. Always tough as the last person sort of gets stuck with the schedule slip and so forth. So we really appreciate you. One of the things that we'll want to talk about is for the future. We don't have to go into all these details. Maybe we'll just share quick impressions while it's fresh, and then we'll reconvene. Is where to put best practice in the program, for example, and so forth.
Yeah, I was talking to Kelly. Hang on just a sec. There's only 37 left.
I'm gonna help with removing.
Thank you.
that happened to me in a meeting a couple weeks ago. It's like, Kelly, if you're still on, you can let yourself go. And I'm like, oh, I thought I canceled out, but I didn't hear anything.
Right.
And you're just pressing more remove. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
While we're here, you guys want to hear a dad joke?
Sure.
Love to.
What is orange and sounds like a parrot? A carrot.
Oh, dad joke. Kelly, don't you have dad jokes?
Oh,
my
dad jokes kind of left me. It's all self-deprecating
Nice.
humor at this point.
Right. Okay, there you go. Just us. I'll take notes.
Thank you guys. Once again, always a creative challenge to put these together. So thank you, Gerald and Keith and John, Jim, for joining us. Ben, I saw you answering questions furiously behind the scenes. So that was awesome.
So Neil,
yeah.
if I, yes, gratitude. But you know what we often do is a quick debrief with just a plus delta. And if everybody's got a plus and a delta, something to change in the future, that would be awesome too.
Sweet. Hey, I got the gratitude out of the way. Why don't you run